Hello, and welcome to another episode of 8 Days of Diana Wynne Jones. I'm Rebecca Framo.
And I'm Emily Tesh, and today we are going to be talking about Fire and Hemlock.
Yeah, we are.
Oh my god, I'm so nervous about this one. So, Fire and Hemlock is the book that Jones's son, Colin Burrow, called My Mother's Best Novel. And he's a Oxford Don professor of English, so he knows something about what he's saying. It's a hell of a book. It's a complicated book. It's a book of the heart. I think it clearly, she talks about writing it in terms of writing at a white heat, being unable to stop, getting up at 6 a.m. to write more. This one clearly came from somewhere very deep and very powerful in the author. It's amazingly complicated. It has a lot of questions and problems, not in there's something wrong with the book way, in that this book is hard and it's asking you to do hard things and to make sense of complicated things.
Although I think it is also a problematic book in a way that I think is really deliberate, and in a way on purpose.
She did all of that on purpose.
Yes.
In fact, the other thing that really jumped out at me reading Jones's own writings about Fire and Hemlock, and she wrote about it quite a lot, is that there's 2 essays where she talks about it. One where she talks in meticulous sort of lit crit depth about the layers of structure and construction and ideals and previous texts that go into it. And another where she says all of that was true, but also it wasn't like that at all.
Yeah.
And this idea of a double layer in art of complete control and intentionality, and at the same time complete uncontrol and pure emotion pouring wildly onto the page, I think is quite an important idea for Fire and Hemlock itself and for what's happening in Fire and Hemlock, which above all else is a book about a double timeline, a double self, if you like. And we're coming back to that one.
It's a book about the double self of, it's everything in the book is about finding a borderline, a way between 2 poles, an intermediate space. But I think most of all, it's a book about how art is that other space. I think it's part of the reason that this is so personal. Clearly,
claim. I'm not sure I agree. The book is serious when you and I disagree with each other about.
I know, because there's so many readings there, and there are 100 different readings, and this is one of the reasons that I've been nervous about this one. There are 100 different readings, and people have read it 100 different ways. There's been a lot written about this book.
It's probably the Jones that has attracted the most scholarly attention, in the way that, say, Howl's Moving Castle, which we come to next in the series, is her most commercially popularly successful book. Fire and Hemlock is a book that people with lit crit brain look at and go, ooh, I've got some things to say. So one of the things I'm nervous about, actually, is that a lot of really clever people have already talked about this book, and they're cleverer than me.
Yes, same.
I don't know what the structuralists think. I'm the opposite of Missy Potter.
And she knew, this book is different from everything else we've done this season. She knew that this book was going to be different, I think. She structures it differently. She talks about it differently. She talks about this book more than she talks about any of her other books. She considered it her masterwork. I think it's pretty clear. Even aside from Colin Burrow saying it's her masterwork, which is really quite generous of him because he's in it and not in a flattering way.
We'll come back to that because it's very funny.
This book is, as well as anything else, this book is a master's thesis. It's everything, when she writes about it, she writes about everything that went into it. And you could structure a course just on the texts that go into this book.
We pulled out a reading list, and we were I was initially planning to try and do some of the reading list, and I looked at it and I was like, I don't have time.
Yeah, we
This,
would
this,
have to do.
this is like a good 4 or 5 months, nothing but reading books for Fire and Hemlock.
We could do a whole bonus season that's just reading books for Fire and Hemlock.
That would be amazing.
It would be really fun.
That would
Oh
be
my
so
god,
much fun.
I'm gonna real quick run down the reading list because it's so long that I think it's really funny. This is every book that is mentioned in the novel, which is not all the books that she talks about as having inspired the novel. Just the books mentioned in the novel
Yeah,
itself.
just the ones is specifically mentioned by name in Fire and Hemlock, which is by no means all the books that are in Fire and Hemlock.
Right. It is Don Quixote, The Wizard of Oz, Five Children in It, The Treasure Seekers, The Wolves of Willoughby Chase, The Box of Delights, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, The Sword and the Stone, The 101 Dalmatians, Henrietta's House, Black Beauty, Sherlock Holmes, Uncle Tom's Cabin, The Three Musketeers, Michael Moorcock, just generally as a writer, The Lord of the Rings, King Arthur, Books of Fairy Stories, Kim, The Man Who Was Thursday, Perilandra, The Napoleon of Notting Hill, The 39 Steps, Tom's Midnight Garden, The Oxford Book of Ballads, The Castle of Adventure, and The Golden Bough, with chapters laid out in excruciating detail.
Yeah, specific chapters of the Golden Bough, which I did actually then go to. That was the I figured like that felt so central to what she was doing. I had to go and pick at some Fraser, and then unfortunately Fraser is so racist that it's really hard to read in that plumbing 19th century way, but nonetheless I did get some useful stuff out of there, and we'll talk about that when we get there.
Yes.
So what is Fire and Hemlock about, Becca?
Fire and Hemlock is, let's see, Fire and Hemlock is a coming of age novel. It's about a girl from a difficult home life whose parents are getting divorced, and she makes friends with an older man at a funeral, and they retain a connection throughout the most crucial years of her adolescence, I would say. And then that friendship turns fraught, and then she forgets him for many years and gets a whole completely different set of boring memories substituted over those crucial years when she was being shaped by this friendship, until the end of the book happens and the beginning of the book, when she suddenly remembers everything that's happened, realizes that she's been living out more or less the story of Tam Lin at the most simple level in all along, and has to go rescue him from the evil fairies who've been dominating his life.
Yeah.
Is that the plot? Is that the plot? Is that the plot?
Yeah. Okay. So Fire and Hemlock is the story of Polly's coming of age. Oh, Fire and Hemlock is a love story.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Fire and Hemlock is a retelling of Tam Lin. Well, how about this? Fire and Hemlock is Lolita.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So, this is the thing. There have been a number of fantastic essays written about this book. Most of them understand the book much better than I do. Most of these essays do not talk very much about the fundamental problem of the book that I think
it's not a problem.
Shapes the book.
It's the point.
So the book is Tam Lin. That is one of the many things that the book most explicitly is. It's Tam Lin, it's Thomas the Rhymer. The sections of the book is broken into 4 parts and many chapters, and all of these chapters are headed with a quote from Tam Lin or Thomas the Rhymer, so you get the point. This is this is the story. This is the story of a man who is in thrall to the Queen of Fairy, who needs to be rescued by a young woman. This is the book of a man who is trying to build his own Janet. He knows he's in Tam Lin or Thomas the Rhymer. And from the first, he's like, the only way out of this is if someone loves me enough to pull me out. So I'd better make that happen. And the person I think we've decided he's 22 or 23 when the book begins. And when he is 22 or 23, he meets the protagonist who is 10 years old.
9. She's 9. Because she's 18 at the end of the book and it's 9 years later.
Who is 9 years old. And immediately recognizes her as the Janet that he's been looking for. All of the books that we've just reeled off are books that he sends her as part of the process of creating the hero who can rescue him out of a 9-year-old girl.
Right. So here's a thesis for you, a reading of what's going on with Polly and Tom. This is the story of a mentor relationship, and a hugely important mentor relationship, one that shapes who Polly becomes. And in fact, losing her memories of Tom, as she discovers she's done at the start of the book, cuts out a huge part of who she is, a huge part of her life, all the fantasy and excitement, all the joy of her life, all these books she's loved and read that have shaped her into the person she is at the end and also the start of the book. The end is the beginning. That's T.S. Eliot. That's four quartets
Yeah.
because the book is structured around four quartets. I'm going to come back to that because I think this book is also, in a way, spell coats. Let's take
Yes.
another run at it.
Let's take another run at several of her books, but carry on.
Yeah. So Polly and Tom, it's a mentor relationship, and it's a beautiful mentor relationship in some ways. It's the fantasy of you're a very lonely little 9-year-old girl. You're quite unhappy at home. You've got parents who are divorcing, and it's a very fraught and unpleasant divorce in which you are repeatedly asked to take sides. And into your life comes an adult who understands and who cares.
Yes.
And Tom, from the first, is an adult who understands and who cares and who values the things that Polly most likes about herself, her great imagination,
Yes.
her ability to see the fantastic in the world and to enjoy it and to expand on it. Tom nourishes this in her, encourages it in her, sends her the kinds of books an imaginative little girl needs to grow. And
Yes.
that reading list was overwhelmingly a list of, interestingly, I think not a list of books you'd necessarily send to a little girl in the mid 1980s when this is published. Maybe to a little girl in the 1950s when Jones was a
Yes.
girl or a teenager.
Books that
40s and
Diana
50s.
Wynne Jones, notably as part of her sort of self myth, self creation, did not have. One of the stories that she tells frequently about herself is that she didn't have books growing up. Her parents wouldn't buy them for them. They had to hoard them. They had to find them where they could. And most of these children's books from that she would have liked to have in the 1950s, or I think she did not read until she was older and was reading them to her children.
Right. And particularly, I thought it was striking that E. Nesbit, Five Children at the Treasure Seekers, is something that comes up very, very early. And Nesbit, I think, sometimes is underestimated as an influence on fantasy fiction generally, but Nesbit's children books are all about children's encounters with the fantastic and the strange in their
Yes.
everyday lives, in their normal
Yes.
child worlds. Okay, so Polly gets this beautiful wish fulfillment of, imagine a good dad,
Yeah.
a father who cares, who wants you to grow, but not just a father, a teacher, a friend, someone who plays with her, who joins in her games of imagination and let's pretend, which used to be the role that her father took in his life before he left.
Yes.
All the way back in Dog's Body, we talked about the father husband.
We sure did.
So, but I'm still going somewhere with this. So, Tom is a mentor, but Tom is clearly, from the very first, and quite explicitly from the very first, a potential lover. And in fact, when he comes back from that funeral where they meet very early in the book, he takes Polly back to her outhouse, and Granny, Polly's grandmother, looks at him and asks the question, what's he got to do with you? Why is he interested in you? And it's very
Yes.
clear from the first that she's aware that this is a potentially dangerous relationship. This is an adult man taking a strong interest in a pretty little girl, and Polly's always described as pretty.
Yes.
This is an erotic relationship, a relationship characterized by erotic desire of the adult for the child from the beginning.
Yes, one of the first things about their conversation, and there's a lot in this. I really want to take a close look at this first meeting because I think everything that happens throughout the rest of the book is prefigured in this first meeting. And one of those things is Polly. We're in Polly's head the entire book. This is not often Diana Wynne Jones does a kind of shifting point of view. You slide in and out of people's heads.
Not that often, actually. She's a master of the close point of view, but certainly this book feels much more sort of tightly narrow focused than say.
Yes, we are never in anyone else's head but Polly's. And Polly, 9 years old, says she knew, of course, by this time, that she was starting to flirt with Mr. Lynn. Mum would have given Polly one of her long, heavy stares if she had been there, because one of the other things about this book that is quite clear is that Polly's mother is jealous of Polly. Polly's mother sees this beautiful little girl as a threat all throughout the book, and that fraught relationship is one of the center poles of the book because, as you've said, Diana Wynne Jones often doesn't write beautiful little girls. That's not a thing that she's usually interested in. I think this book is really striking in how much and how often it dwells on Polly's beauty. It's
On
crucial
Polly's
to the book.
body generally, we know a lot about Polly's physicality, about her appearance, about how it changes, about how she goes through puberty. Because, right, this book is always about Polly as desire object, and she knows that about herself. She is flirting. She's doing it on purpose. And I think this is one of the times when Jones's strong insistence on child as agent, as person, as someone fully in control of their own thoughts and beliefs and desires can be really disturbing to read.
Yes.
I
Yes.
find it profoundly disturbing. I was too old the first time I read Fire and Hemlock, and like going around like general poll of my friends who read Jones, did you read Fire and Hemlock as a 13-year-old or did you read it as an adult? Because it makes a big difference to how you respond to
Yes.
the book.
I read Fire and Hemlock for the first time when I was 9, and I was too young. I didn't get it. I did not appreciate it. I didn't enjoy it. I went back to her much more straightforward fantasy books. I read it again when I was, I think, 14 or 15, and I loved it. I identified so I didn't see anything problematic or disturbing
No,
about the book.
no.
I was exactly the right age. Then I don't think I've read it since.
Right.
Because you think back on it and you're
And
like,
like,
oh
whoa.
boy.
But actually, I think you do need to go back to it. You do need to rethink it. I'm still talking about the problem of Polly and Tom, of course. This is the thing that hit me when I reread it this time, is like they are doing a specific thing, this erotically charged mentor relationship between the adult and the child, in which, crucially, Polly always insists that she is treated like a boy. From the very first time
Yes.
she and Tom begin their Let's Pretend games together, Polly is absolutely certain, I'm a boy for the purpose of this game.
She is pretending to be a boy. This
Right.
is the layers of pretense and of liminality and of gender games are really baked into this book. So the first thing that Polly and Tom start to do when they meet in the garden, the center of their connection, is Polly, who's been there because she's been sent in on a let's pretend game she's been sort of dared to go in there by her friend Nina, and we'll talk more about Nina, who is her let's pretend friend. And so she's Mr. Lin is an adult trying to, and they start to ask each other, what do you like best to do? They almost start to ask each other to do it at the same time, which is the first kind of sign of their connection. And Polly says, what I like best, apart from running and shouting and jokes and fighting, is being things. Being things? Like what? He sounded wistful and mystified. Making things like heroes up with other people than being them, Polly explained. And then they start to make up a set of heroes that they are. And the hero that Polly is a girl pretending to be a boy.
Yes. So she invents these identities for herself and Tom. Tom is the hero Tan Cool. Notice, I think, the Tan syllable echoing Tanamil all the way back in spell codes, echoing some other characters we've seen around the place as well. Tan Cool Torquil, I think.
Yep.
Takroy in a future
Although
book.
also Diana identifies Tomlin and the goon, Erskine, as coming out of the same character, the same person in her head, which I think is really interesting.
Very, very tall, very lonely man, yes. I will come back to that as well. What was I saying? So they
Tan Cool.
Tancool, right. So it's not pretending to be these heroes. Specifically, Polly is interested in actually being them. That's always how she phrases it. And being or becoming a hero, and her idea of her own alter ego, the girl pretending to be a boy, is that they're a trainee. They are learning heroism. They are learning their place in a heroic world and becoming the adult hero, with Tom Tancool as the teacher. And Tom is actually initially like quite uncomfortable with this. He's like, maybe you could be teaching me?
Yes.
And Polly insists, no, it's got to be that way around. And that sets the tone for their relationship over the coming year, 2 years of story time, novel time. Which brings me back to what I think is actually happening here, which is pederasty, specifically. And I use that term, the classical term. Pederasty is the relationship between an adult man and an adolescent boy, in which the adult is providing mentorship and guidance and moral and intellectual growth, and the boy is providing his beauty.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
and it is the relationship which is echoed in, say, well, in almost all of T.H. White's writings, but in particular in Sword in the Stone, which is specifically noted as one of the books Tom sends to Polly. And it's the relationship which is how the philosopher Plato describes love in the Symposium, that foundational Western work of philosophy of love. It's a heroic relationship and a loving relationship, and a relationship not of equals, but of people who each have a role to play. And it's absolutely necessary for the purpose of a pederastic relationship that Polly be a boy. And I think a lot of Fire and Hemlock is about fitting different frameworks around Polly and Tom's relationship. So this is one of them. The framework of the sort of the chaste courtly romance is perhaps another
Yes.
that you wanted to bring up.
Yes. One of the things that is not in the reading list, but that Diana Wynne-Jones talks as being kind of her. So I think quite a lot of this book, among the other things that it's doing, is meditation on the concept of hero and meditation on the idea of a female hero in particular. What does it look like to take a girl child and make her a female hero? Is that possible? How do you do it? One of the foundational texts for Diana Wynne-Jones in that line is The Fairy Queen. So I boldly thinking that I would do some of the reading list for this book, went and read some of The Fairy Queen.
So, yeah, we both picked the longest and most complicated. And how far did we get?
Not as far as we ought to have. Again, whole symposium. But one of the tensions, the fraught tensions in books, in the chivalric romance, in the first book of The Fairy Queen, is the idea that you have a man and a woman and they're going adventuring together and they love each other, but they cannot love each other in a physical way. If they were going to love each other in a physical way, the idea of loving each other in a physical way ruins the ethos of it. It turns what is beautiful and righteous and chaste into something that is a sin, even though they both want to do it. That is
which is also true of the pederastic relationship. You don't actually have sex with an aristocratic boy you were raising to manhood, because that would spoil his future manhood.
Right.
So
but you think about it.
Right, only you think about it. So right, there's this tension of desire, which is fine as long as it's never fulfilled, is one of the tensions that is always hovering over Polly and Tom.
Yes.
Because it's always like you read it as an adult and you're like, what the fuck? She's 9.
Yeah, there's so much in the book that's like, what the fuck, she's 9. And I do, like, again, that tension is on purpose. Because
it's on purpose.
So much of the book is about places where, I'm sorry to use this word, I'm going to use it, I can't help but use it in the context of this book, it's about liminality. It's about the border spaces in between where things are possible and where things are not possible.
In fact, I would even go so far to say that Polly's childhood is one of the reasons it's possible for her to become the Janet, because her enemy, Tom's ex-wife, the Fairy Queen Laurel, the Titania, the Maeve, the Lorelei, she's looking for an adult, right? She does know this story as well. Everyone in this story knows the story, except to begin with Polly. So in fact, Tom even has another girlfriend who is an adult, and he says it was to throw Laurel off the scent. Right. Polly's existence in the liminal space, in the not quite a woman, not quite not space, is what allows her to slip by unnoticed.
Yeah, there is someone else in the story who doesn't know the story, which is Polly's grandmother. Polly's grandmother knows other stories, but doesn't know the story of Tamlin. And that's very important, I think, to the end of the book. We'll talk about that later, because Polly's grandmother is a Janet in multiple ways. A failed Janet and a successful Janet.
This is a book where Jones really, really leans heavily on her doubling trick. Mm-hmm. Every character has multiple echoes and resonances. So Polly is one of a group of 3 female friends, 3 teenage girls, Polly, Fiona, and Nina. She's also part of a sort of pattern of 3 generations of women, Granny, her mother Ivy, and Polly. But then there's also the 3 love interests that Tom has, which is Polly and Mary and Laurel.
Right.
These sort of trios and layers mean that all of these characters have resonances with each other, which highlights different aspects. And Polly herself, Jones points out in her writings, Polly is a
It's a
joke.
pun.
The name Polly is from the Greek poly, meaning many.
Yep.
It's a pun. It's a pun.
It's a
I
pun.
honestly think this is the thing about this book, right? Jones are clearly doing something really complicated and intellectual and structural, but also when it's Diana Wynne Jones, there is always fundamentally a joke that the
Yes.
whole thing is based on.
And Laurel and Ivy is also a pun. These are,
Yeah,
are the
because
fancy and the less fancy creeping parasitic leaves.
both of them, I think, are. I mean, also they're both mum. They're
Yeah.
both mothers, stepmothers, and this is a book. This is a book about child abuse.
Yes.
Like
I think that's
the
one of
problem of Polly and Tom is partly that it's a book about child abuse, but also Tom is an abused child. We meet other young men in Laurel's orbit who are very clearly children she is grooming in order to destroy them.
yes.
Polly's own experiences with her mother and with her father are horrific,
Yes.
um, are cruel, at one point nearly drive her to suicide.
Yes.
This is a book about the awful things that adults do to children, and central to it is the awful thing that Tom is doing to Polly, which is trying to turn her into someone who loves him enough to save him.
Yes, which echoes, Tom and Polly are echoes of each other in multiple ways. And again, you mentioned, but to dive into it a little bit more explicitly, what we know about Tom's backstory is that, like Polly, he was also unlike Polly, he's an orphan. He has no parents. Polly has parents; they're terrible. Tom has no parents. He was adopted by Laurel, who he then married when he was a child, and she put him in a fancy boarding school. And then they married at what age is unclear, but by the time he is 22 or 23, we do know that, they are divorcing. So they must have married before then. She has a picture of him as a child, as a boy around Polly's age, in her house. Polly doesn't recognize the picture of him because he's so young that she can't identify that this is Tom. And when he is a child, hang on, I want to find the description of the picture.
Oh, yes, hang on, I've got it.
Okay, great.
It was a slightly old-fashioned picture of a mischievously grinning, fair-haired boy. Whoever he was, he looked older than Seb, who is, at this point in the story, Polly's question mark boyfriend, in mid-teens. And he was too fair anyway. He was nobody Polly knew. Yet there was a sense of familiarity about the photo, as if the mirror trick had worked and Polly was going to know this boy sometime.
Yes. And the thing about the boy in the photograph did not have the same look as Mr. Lin at all. It was as if he was going to grow up in a different direction, a careless, light-hearted direction, into someone more like Leslie Piper. So she has this picture of him taken before child abuse, and now she knows him as a man who is shaped by abuse. One of the most striking characteristics that she comes to again and again about Tom is that he is always apologizing. He is very, she's constantly telling him, be less obedient. Because whenever Polly says something, Tom will change course and do the thing that she says. And he has the way that he laughs is a sort of guilty, gulped off laughter, like he's not supposed to laugh. She sort of notices every time he gives a normal laugh because most of his laughter is not normal. I think these are pretty clear
Yeah,
signs of what his life with Laurel was like.
yeah. But it's also striking that he responds to Polly, who at this point, like when she's first noting this, again, she is 9, he responds to Polly as if she's Laurel.
Yes.
Polly and Laurel kind of are each other in a very real way. I mean, they even physically resemble each other, which I always thought was striking, that they both have the same kind of sort of really dramatic blonde hair, which is the first thing Tom notices about Polly. And when she's coming up with her idea of, I'll be a girl pretending to be a boy, he's like, but you won't cut your hair, will you?
Right, it's such beautiful hair. Mary Fields, his sort of screen girlfriend, poor Mary Fields, who exists in the book for nothing except to be a screen girlfriend and to be fair to Tom. I do think that, I think part of the tension of the book is that Tom knows that grooming up a Janet is not a good thing to do.
Right. Tom knows what he's doing because it's what was done to him, so he knows it's wrong.
Right. And so he is always trying to put these layers in between to make it safe, and Mary Fields is one of these layers. The first time that he and Polly meet up again, it's the third time that they meet. He's like, great, we're going to go out driving and I'm going to take you to see my girlfriend, which Polly hates. And Mary
And
Fields,
the girlfriend also
the
hates.
girlfriend, also hates. Mary Fields immediately clocks this as like, why, this is weird. Why are you doing this? And they're like, and I mean, he's constantly trying to equalize their relationship in ways that I think are genuinely well meant. And also a bit weird because they call the thing into question. One of the things I noticed on this read that I'd never noticed before, in during the first section of the book, they're writing letters back and forth. We get a lot of their letters verbatim with comical misspellings. Polly, because she can't yet spell because she's 9, 10, I think 10 by the time they're writing letters. And Tom, because he's writing her letters back like, I'm so sorry, I'm all butterfingers, look at all my typos. So the result is you get 2 letters that both look like equally bad versions of prose. As soon as Polly starts writing normal letters because she's learned how to spell, the typos disappear from Tom's letters.
Oh my god. Oh, you're right. Right, he's trying so hard to make them equal, and everything he does to do that is actually more manipulative.
Yeah.
The harder you try to make this not weird, the weirder it gets.
The weirder it gets.
It is so weird to take a random small girl to meet your girlfriend and be like, this is Polly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that Polly?
Yeah. It's weird. It's a weird thing to do to him. Oh, it's weird.
Right.
And like this, but again, like from the start, and this is what gets Polly involved in this at all, because so it turns out at the end, we'll talk more about the end later.
Oh, we will.
But it is so the way the book works is that like the plot of the book, such as it is, and it is a very slice of life book. Mostly, it is about Polly's day-to-day experiences of being a child and how the world of the imagination shapes them. And we know this because every time we are occasionally flashing back to Polly as a 19-year-old, thinking back on all she's lost, with being made to forget everything associated with Tom, which also includes forgetting everything associated with that world of imagination that he sort of nourished in her, that made her life worth living over the course of the years between 9 and 15. But the fantastical comes in, the thing that makes this a fantasy book, because as Polly and Tom sort of develop hero stories for each other, they develop the myth of Tan, Cool, and Hero. They invent it back and forth. And at the very beginning, they're trying to come up with it, and Tom says, "You tell me how it is. I don't know how it is. I've lost that gift of the imagination." He doesn't say so in so many words, but he's forgotten how to do it. He says, "You guide me. You teach me." Again, trying to make it equal. And what that means is that Polly gets inextricably intertwined in what turns out to be Tom's fatal fairy gift that he was given as a curse on divorcing Laurel, the Thomas the Rhymer gift, that everything he says will come true, in a sense. All of the stories that he's making up in some way become true. So as Tom and Polly go on, they're inventing this world, and they keep finding weird evocations, reflections, mirror versions of this.
Well, sometimes just straight up things from their story appear in real life. I think the really striking one is the horse.
The horse.
Let's talk about the horse. In fact, let's talk about the horse in terms of... I'm going to talk about the horse, and then I'm going to talk about Hippolytus, and then I'm going to come back to the horse.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the earliest things that Polly comes up with for Tom, and this is probably for their second meeting, so they've been exchanging letters, and then Polly's mother goes down to London to see a divorce lawyer. She drops Polly off with Tom for the day while she goes to meet her lawyer. Side note, would you drop off your 10-year-old daughter with a random man she met once at a funeral in London? I think it's a terrible mother.
Yes.
But this is not a side note. This is intentional. Yes, this is a very dangerous thing to do with your child. Hand her off to a stranger. Ivy is a bad mother. She doesn't care about Polly. But Polly has a wonderful time with Tom.
Yes.
And in the course of exchanging letters, one of the things that Polly has told Tom is that he has a special horse. Tan Cool has a special horse.
Yep.
And he tamed this special horse, and they've got a little myth about it. And they go out walking down the street in London, and there's a horse.
Yep.
A really, really scary horse.
Yep.
A literal horse charging down the street, panicked, terrified, about to trample Polly. And Tom does something heroic for the first time, as far as we can tell, in real life, in that he rescues the horse, calms it down, calls it lots of rude names, saves Polly's life in doing so. And Polly's really upset with herself looking back on this later, and she thinks, well, I wasn't heroic at all. I just sat there and screamed, which is of course the role of the heroine.
Right.
Is to sit there and scream while he does something heroic. But Tom in turn says, no, you were, because until I realised you were in danger, I couldn't do anything. Right. But this horse is not a complete surprise, because Polly has seen something like it before. On the day of the funeral, when she met Tom at Hunsdon House, the house of the Fairy Queen, she discovered that Tom had the right to take 6 pictures away from the house, and she helped him choose the pictures.
Yep.
And Polly did a little bit of a trick, a little bit of a cheat. She took pictures from the pile that Tom wasn't supposed to have.
They were much better pictures.
Yeah, they were better. One of them was the photograph of the title, Fire and Hemlock, which Polly has kept ever since on her bedroom wall. The other 5 we find out about, many of the imaginings are structured around them. One of them is what Polly describes as a Chinese picture of a horse, a picture of great vividness and force. And this picture has come to life in the person of Tan Cool's horse right there on this street in London. And there's this slippage from art to imagination to the real, back and forth. And then a further slippage takes place as Tom eventually reveals he's sold the Chinese horse picture for a large sum of money and used it to buy a car, which is also his horse.
Yep.
And
he drives it very
colour. He drives the car heroically, as in he's terrifying and no one should get in the car with him ever.
Which is, I think, a very funny commentary on hero business also.
But then by the end of the book, it's clear that the horse is also a symbol for something in Tom. It's his rage. It's his determination to survive. It's his panicked fleeing from Laurel and everything she represents. It's the danger that he can do both to himself, that he is both to himself and to others, but also the power he has to trample things under his feet, to trample Polly under his feet in his race to get away. So the horse is this wide range of symbols that runs all through the book.
I did wonder whether at the end you noticed that the horse's water is death again.
Oh god, it is! The horse's water is death again. The horse turns out, Tom thinks the horse is a locus of power for him. It turns out to be one of the things he needs to let go in order to survive.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that Polly brings to life through the magic of the curse, the gift. Her imagination is what gives Tom power through this curse Laurel bestowed on him to make things real.
Yes.
It's by using Polly that he can understand himself and make use of himself.
Yes.
But let me talk about Hippolytus.
Talk about Hippolytus, yes.
Because one thing that really struck me when I went from here back to the Golden Bough, which is that Hippolytus is one of the myths that Fraser is most interested in this enormous work of early comparative anthropology. He's trying to explain his Roman myth fanfiction, which is a Greek myth fanfiction, which is about the myth of Hippolytus, which is one that Jones never name checks in her many myths she name checks in this book, but it's got to be in there. Yes. Oh boy, does it got to be in there, because Hippolytus is the story of a young man who is torn between 2 powerful women, or rather 2 powerful goddesses. He is sworn to the goddess Artemis, and he and Artemis have this very close and affectionate relationship built on mutual trust and shared interests. They go hunting together because that's what Artemis is all about. She's the goddess of the hunt. And she's the chaste goddess of the hunt. She is the virgin goddess. She is utterly opposed to sex, and therefore Hippolytus also sets himself utterly opposed to sex. He also have nothing to do with Aphrodite, who's the goddess of love. So Hippolytus and Artemis are very, very happy together in what is clearly a romance, a chaste romance, a sort of tense and fraught chaste romance, where if they touched each other, it would spoil everything. Because it would just spoil everything Artemis is. She is the virgin, the maiden.
Yep.
But Aphrodite is furious because she's been insulted, because she has the right to a part of any young man's life. And because she's so angry, she, through her agent, the mortal woman Phaedra, who is Hippolytus's stepmother, sets out to destroy Hippolytus through the power of sex. So Hippolytus's stepmother conceives a terrible desire for him. When he won't go for it, she accuses him of rape. on the basis of this false accusation. His father, Theseus, arranges to have him destroyed by... I won't go into the details. Effectively, he's destroyed by water, by the god Poseidon, and he's destroyed by his own horses. Hippolytus, hippos is Greek for horse. He's deeply associated with horses, with being a horse rider, a horse tamer.
Yeah.
So there's if that is not in the book, I will eat my hat, because Tom is this figure of the young man torn between the maiden and the sexy stepmother.
Yes.
Who is also his wife.
Yep.
Tom is destroyed by water, very nearly, through the agency of his own horse.
In fact, very, very literally at the end, I'm jumping ahead, but the parallel to Tom, the other figure who is at risk, the him or me that runs throughout this book is Seb, who is also a child at the beginning of the book. Laurel is his stepmother.
Literally his stepmother.
Literally his stepmother, and at the end of the book, he's going to take Tom's place as her doomed consort. Step-parents are integral to this book, and it is also a reflection of Polly, because one of the threads between Polly and Ivy, her mother, after, in the first section of the book, Ivy is in the process of getting divorced from Polly's father. After that, Ivy takes in a series of lodgers, each of one of which she hopes she's going to have true happiness with. We get this sequence most pointedly in the second one, where she takes in a lodger called David Brogg, who uses Polly to send little notes for his betting games. It's his one little secret that he keeps from Ivy, is that he's betting pounds on the ponies. And in order to cover this up, he pays Polly elaborate compliments about how pretty she is, what a heartbreaker she's going to be, how sad he is that he's her stepfather, and therefore he's going to have to give her away to some other young man. Polly is 11.
Polly is 11.
Polly is 11, and Ivy notices and eventually decides that, and it's because of a book that she receives from Tom that she thinks that Polly has gotten as a present from either her father or the lodger, David Brogg, that Polly is ruining her happiness with her boyfriend, and therefore Polly has to go. And she kicks Polly out, because Polly, again, 11, is a threat.
Right, and in fact, this was a thread even between Polly and Ivy over Polly's actual father, Reg, that Polly is in some way corrupting Ivy's men to her side, taking control of them. This is actually what Ivy does, right? Ivy is the parasitic plant. But again and again, Polly is blamed by her mother for attracting the sexual interest of adult men.
Yes.
Which is because she's the competition.
Which maybe is part of the reason that Polly is so eager to engage in, to be the girl pretending to be a boy. This is always the role that she identifies with. Later on there's a play of Twelfth Night, and she's like, "Oh, Viola, that's hero, that's me. I'm the girl pretending to be a boy heroically." And there's about a year after the horse incident where Polly's like, "Right, I was very weak during the horse incident. I've got to go become a hero. I am going to go play football with the boys, and I'm going to be so good at it that they'll invite me to join the football team."
Right, and this works. To be clear, Polly is great at being tomboy hero. She has a great... She turns out she genuinely loves athletics. This actually remains a thread in her school life, that she keeps getting involved in sports. But there's also the descriptions of her losing her beautiful little girlness. Her hair goes into grey rat's tails. All her clothes are too small and have holes in the knees. And then when she realises she's going to meet Tom again, she puts on the pretty dress she wore last time she saw him when she went down to London on the divorce lawyer day. And it's 2 sizes too small. It doesn't fit. And she looks awful.
Yes.
And she can't stand it. She's heartbroken. She needs to be pretty to see Tom. Again, she's 11.
Right. Her grandmother says, she goes to her grandmother and says, "Can you buy me a new dress? I need to be pretty." And her grandmother says, "I think jeans and a sweater would be nice. I think maybe you should wear jeans and a sweater." And she gets pants and a sweater, like nice clothes, but not a little girl dress. And that's what she feels comfortable in.
Although, notice, also at this point, she sorts out the grey rat tail hair, and her mother offers to cut it all off, which Polly, as a child, is forced to this gender performance of pretty little girlness, which is quite clear she's not that keen on. And then when Ivy offers to cut her hair, Polly freaks out, loses it. "No, you can't. I love it. I want my hair." The only thing that's changed is that we know Tom likes Polly's hair.
Yeah.
He said so. And I thought, I read this and I thought it's the thing about, like, I think I said to you that if this book feels like heterosexuality is a trap sometimes.
Yes.
It's not just that Tom makes Polly into a girl, it's that he makes her want to be the girl.
Yes. Yeah. But she also he but it's again, it's never so simple because he makes her want to be the girl, but he also makes her want to be the hero. Um
Yes.
the hero business is what pushes Polly into becoming a hero. And I think one of the things about heroism that the book really emphasizes and is really interested in is that in order to be a hero, you can't do it for yourself. You have to do it for somebody else. There's this sequence that is again a joke, but I think prefigures a lot of the rest of the book during this year where Polly is going really, really all in on hero business. And there's a school bully. And this sequence is something that reflects a lot of what Jones has written about, seeing the germ for this sequence over and over again, seeing the girl who beat up the school bully, a splendid Britomart of a girl, and how everyone cheered her on, and realizing, oh, that's heroism. So she puts this sequence in the book. Polly wants to get in. The school bully is being mean to Polly.
Mm-hmm.
Polly wants to fight her, but she can't do it for herself because that's not what heroes do. So she waits until she sees the school bully picking on someone else. And then she's like, great, now I have an excuse. And she marches in and beats up the school bully. She actually does it twice. The first time she kind of scares her off. She basically, like, a couple smacks is enough because the school bully is so startled to see mild-mannered Polly going after. And the second time, they get in a real knockdown, drag-out fight because the school bully has gone after her friend, Nina, who at this point, Polly isn't even friends with. They're not speaking to each other. Their friendship is on and off again all throughout the book. But Polly's like, can't do that, goes in, rescues Nina, and then finds herself, because Nina is so grateful that she's like, oh, Polly wants to be my friend again. And so she has to go home with Nina and hang out with Nina.
To be honest, you said this felt like one of the most sapphic Joneses, one of the most femme slashable Joneses, and I agree. There's Polly and Fiona, who we'll talk about. Probably we booked 2 recording sessions for this because we knew we would take a while on Fire and Hemlock. Probably next session, Polly and Fiona. But Polly and Nina, I feel like at this particular point, this is fully like the knight and his lady. You're like, oh god, now I've got to go back to the castle.
I've got to hang out with her. It's going to be boring. And it is boring. And it's not just the knight and the lady, but it's the knight and the wrong lady. I love Nina. Polly and Nina's friendship is important.
So
And
important.
we will talk about why. But at this stage, Polly and Nina are at a stage where they have nothing. They don't really have any interests in common, and so having to go back with Nina and hang out with her because she's obliged to, because she's just rescued Nina, and because rescuing someone puts you under an obligation to them, and that puts you in peril. That felt like I'm looking at the sequence of like, is this Lancelot and Elaine? Like you have to go home with the wrong lady because you've saved her, and that traps you into a relationship you don't want.
Right, there's which is an echo of like the relationship between the hero and the person the hero saves is the heart of the book, right?
Right.
Um, who gets to do the saving and who gets to be saved, and how do you save them, and what are you left with after that?
And why do you save them? Because Polly also didn't save Nina for Nina. She saved Nina because she was looking for an excuse to be a hero. Because a hero needs someone to save. And a person in distress needs someone to save them. It's almost transactional. And that's really core, I think, to the Tom and Polly relationship also, the way that they are constantly, constantly taking it in turns to rescue each other. And it is genuine. And it is also calculated.
Yeah. And this duality of reality. I hate that. That rhymes in like really unpleasant way. But this doubled reality is from the very first. I mean, Jones signals it right away, right up front. The opening chapter, I think, actually is a little bit clunky. She does the same thing much more elegantly in Hexwood in the 90s. But the opening chapter, in which Polly is 18, 19, looking back on the past and realizing that she has 2 sets of memories, that chapter exists to alert us to the fact that the world can be 2 things at the same time.
Yes.
And the idea of a world that is 2 things turns up over and over again, and we're given names for the 2 simultaneous, parallel, overlapping, non-overlapping worlds, realities. Then they're nowhere and now here.
Yes, and that is the sort of central image of the book, the image that shapes the book, is that in that opening sequence, I think I keep talking about the sequence at the funeral as the opening sequence. You're right,
It's
there is an
not.
opening chapter which
Right.
sets the
But
duality.
the thing is that the funeral is so good is when the book kicks off, but no, there's a frame narrative, which
Yes.
is, I mean, maybe, probably intentionally, a little dry, a little dull, because this is Polly with only her dry, dull, Tom-free memories.
It's only now here and not nowhere. But I'm just going to read this whole section with the vases. It's long, I'm sorry, but it is fundamental. So they're walking through the garden, and they're coming up on this house. This book is also a gothic. Hunston House looms over it, and Polly is constantly getting it. You know, what kicks it off is Polly entering the house she's not supposed to be in, and constantly being drawn back to the big, creepy house where magic lurks. And in the front of the house, there are two vases. Watch! Mr. Lynn's hand moved on the right-hand vase. The vase began to spin slowly, grating a little. 2, 3 heavy turns, and it stopped. Now Polly could see there were letters engraved on the front of the vase. Here, she said. Now watch again, said Mr. Lynn. His big left hand spun the other vase. This one went round much more smoothly. For a while it was a gray stone blur. Then it grated, slowed, and settled, and there were letters on it too. Now, Polly read. Now here. What does that mean? Mr. Lynn spun both vases, one slowly, grinding and groaning, the other smooth and blurring. They both stopped at exactly the same time. Where? Said the one on the left. Now, read the right-hand one. Upon which Mr. Lynn spun them again. This time when they stopped, the vases read, No and Where. Oh, I see, said Polly. Nowhere. That's clever. She moved sideways to look round the curve of the vases, and found they still said nowhere, that this was because the left-hand vase now seemed to say now, and the right-hand one here from where she had moved. Both vases really said nowhere, but the letters were so arranged on them that you could never see the whole word at once on the same vase. Polly made sure by going right up to them, ducking under Mr. Lynn's arm, and putting her head sideways to read the letters round the other side. Yes, that's right, Mr. Lynn said. They both say nowhere really. He spun them again, the slow grinding one and the fast smooth one, and this time they came up with here, now. Heroes see things like that, he said. It's obviously an enchantment of some kind, Polly agreed, humoring him. It must be, he said. It sounded as if he was humoring her.
Okay, before I say anything intelligent, I'm going to say something stupid. Are you ready?
Yes, please.
Vase sounds insane to me. It's a vase.
I know, I was thinking that even as I said it.
It's all right. You can't help it.
I can't help it. This is important to the podcast. It's so people can tell us apart when we talk.
It is really important. Okay, now I've said the stupid thing. I will say the other thing that struck me listening to that, which is that there is a really, in all these double worlds and double meanings, the where now, the now here, both vases really say nowhere.
Yes.
Insofar as there is a truth, an underlying truth, that truth is the nowhere. And what nowhere means in the context of Fire and Hemlock is constantly being dug into and unpacked, but nowhere is, I think, what Jones in her writing elsewhere calls the land of the imagination, the mythic space, the heroic space.
Yes, that is constantly just sort of trickling out in little ways into the real world. And Polly thinks of this in these terms all throughout the course of the book. She thinks about the world that the sort of dull, flat, everyday world that she's living in is the now here, and the magic, the world of the heroic, the mythic as nowhere.
Sorry, I just had, like, if you could see me, you would see I was clapping because I just had a thought and I feel insane. So one thing that Jones says is fundamental for structuring the whole book is the Odyssey. We haven't even really talked about that, but we will. But I just remembered where else I've seen the image of two vases.
Yeah,
it's Homeric. It's fucking Homeric because it is the two vases of fate that Zeus measures out fate for mortals from two vases.
Of course.
Two vases, and you never get the full thing poured out in full measure, and it's because I've just been rereading the Iliad. There's also the image from Hesiod, Pandora. It's not Pandora's box in the original myth, it's Pandora's jug, her vase with hope in the bottom.
Which is what Polly is.
Polly is Pandora. We are told that. Polly is Pandora. We're not told that in the book. We're told that in Jones's writings, but she is the girl with all the gifts.
Hang on. I'm going to keep talking. I'm finding the list. Again, it's like the list of books. The list of all the things that Diana says that Polly and Tom are. Keep talking.
No, I don't have anything else to say. I was just like, holy shit, that's where the vases come from. Of course, it's not the only place the vases come from, but this idea of the two vases as vases of destiny, of fate, of the future, because that image of the nowhere now here, without specifically referring to those vases, comes back at the very end of the question of what's going to happen to Polly and Tom there. Where now?
Yes.
After the full events of Tam Lin, where now?
Yes.
Uh, it comes back to the question of, are we nowhere or now here? Where are we measuring out our fate from? What's it coming to? Oh my god, I feel insane.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're 1,000% right. So Diana says Polly is Gerda in the Snow Queen, Snow White, Britomart, Saint George, Pierrot, Pandora, Andromeda, Janet from Tamlin, and many more. Also Telemachus. Tom appears to cling to the role of Odysseus, but in fact, Tom loses that role to Polly and becomes in turn Leander. Kay kidnapped by the Snow Queen, the Night of the Moon, Article, Bellerophon, Prometheus, Epimetheus, Harlequin, Perseus, Orpheus, and of course Tamlin. He and Polly are continually swapping active and passive roles and sharing the part of Odysseus between them. That's one thing. The other thing I want to say again, just speaking of that scene in the garden as prefiguring the whole of the book, and speaking of fate, is the first encounter that Polly has with Tom. So Polly's sitting in on this funeral. It's a funeral happening at the house. She's accidentally snuck her way in because she thinks she's following her friend Nina in as part of the, game they're playing.
Yeah, Nina is to blame for the whole plot.
Nina is to blame for the whole plot. And also, Polly sneaking her way in and doing something heroic because she thinks she's following someone else doing something heroic, but in fact she's leading the way. Again, is part of the power dynamic shifts that figure the plot. So she's sitting there, a little girl, among all these adults. She sees that there's one other little boy there among all the other adults too. And one of the adults, Thomas Lynn, sees her and takes her out of the funeral, like kind of sneaks up to her and is like, he doesn't say anything. He just takes her hand. He was now holding out his hand to take hers and make sure she didn't get away. Feeling fated, Polly put her hand into his. It was a big hand, a huge one, and folded hers quite out of sight under its row of long fingers. And then he says to her, he takes her out, and he says, I wish I could have thought of a way to get that poor boy Seb out of it too. I could see he was quite as bored as you were, but he didn't have the sense to sit near the door.
Oh, God.
She realized he had sat down on purpose near the door, and she knew, perhaps without quite understanding it, that if she ran away, it would mean he had to go back into the funeral again. She was his excuse for coming out of it, so she stayed.
And of course, the funeral is, symbolically, but also in a very real way, Tom's funeral. So the way the magic at Hunsdon House works is there is this figure, Laurel, who is the fairy queen, this evil witch, and she has a husband, Morton. He's called Morton Leroy, which means death the king. It's not subtle. Incidentally, Polly's father's name is Reg, as in the king.
Yep. Yep.
And both of them are immortal. This is pretty clearly what's going on. The way they become immortal is they prey on others. Every 9 years, a young man, a lover of Laurel's, is killed to give Morton a new lease on life. This is the sacrifice of the king, which Jones helpfully gives us specific chapter references in the Golden Bough in case we want to look it up.
They're just running. She's just running through chapter titles, Polly reading the Golden Bough on the train, going, death of the king. Right.
The sacrificial king. Magicians as kings, you say. Anyway, so every 9 years, a young man is killed to give Morton new life. This is the death of the sacrificial king.
Except every 81 years, it's a woman who is killed to give Laurel new life, which, if you saw me covering my face right now, it's because I just realized that it is absolutely insane for Tom to say he's going to take Seb out of the funeral. It's his mother's funeral!
It's his mother's funeral, right. It's clear. What seems to be happening is that Laurel and Morton take it in turns to basically go and acquire a target.
Yes.
Usually Laurel gets a guy. Occasionally, every 81 years, Morton acquires a woman. And the fate of this person is to be killed after 9 years. But at this point, Tom's in the funeral. He has already been chosen as the next sacrifice. the reason he's not dying right now at the start of the book is that it just by coincidence happens to be the woman's turn. Like,
Yes.
this actually should have been Tom's funeral. That's really clear. And by the end of the book, the next funeral sequence at Hunsdon House, it's supposed to be Tom's funeral. And by that point, Morton has been waiting 18 years, and it's
Showing.
the descriptions of him increasingly show like horror, right?
Yeah.
The sort of the collapse of man into corpse.
Yes. Although it was never actually, as we learned at the end, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I've just realized something and I have to tell you it.
Go
So
on.
we learned at the end that it was never actually supposed to be Tom at all. Originally, Laurel's interest was Tom has an older brother. We don't know that's true until the end. But Tom has an older brother who made a deal with Laurel to take Tom instead. So Tom has been sort of sold, has been faded into this by someone else's decision, much as Polly gets faded into it by Tom pulling her out of the house. And his brother, this is hinted at really, really early on in the book, when we first see his brother through a shop that Tom and Polly have made up. They've decided that Tom is a hero named Tan Cool, and his alter ego is he runs a hardware store in a little town called Stow on the Water. And they go to Stow on the Water, and there's a hardware store, and there's people in it, and they look at Tom and they say, "Oh wow, you look just like the Mr. Piper who runs the store." And Tom and Polly are aghast.
Side note, it's completely insane that Mr. Piper, in order to avoid Laurel, has run away and changed his name, but he's changed his name to Thomas.
He's changed his name to Thomas Piper.
which is the name of his younger brother who got sold to the Fairy Queen in his place. Like, there's a whole weird separate story happening here that is only ever hinted at.
But they walk in the hardware store, and there are signs all over the hardware store saying, "Do it yourself."
Oh my god!
Yeah, so Tom has created an alter ego, but the alter ego, in fact, his older brother has created Tom to be his sacrificial burden and to take on the role of the sacrifice to Laurel. But the fact that it's an 81 year rather than a 9 year gives him time to get away and to try and formulate an exit plan.
Right, try and groom your own Janet.
Try and groom your own Janet. And he's very lucky that Janet, it is fated that Polly walks into the funeral and becomes a Janet. And I do think, I'm going to talk a little bit about Janet's grandmother now, because I do think that the fate comes into it a little bit. So Polly has Janet's grandmother, Polly's grandmother. Polly has these awful parents. The stable force in her life is her grandmother, who, whenever her parents are being particularly horrible, sort of walks in and says, "I'm taking her. You are not doing this. I am taking her home." She's responsible. She immediately flags Tom Lynn as bad news, or as a potential threat to her daughter. And she loves Polly. And she fights for her in what I think, eventually she fights to get legal guardianship of Polly in what I think is a really direct echo of a Janet holding on to a Tam Lin. There's this really lovely description of her just walking in. She's like, I'm just determined. I walk into offices and I sit there and I don't let them kick me out until they give me the right paperwork and say that I can have you, that I can be your guardian. And what we learn at the end of the book is that Polly's grandmother was one of Laurel's chosen. That he was a musician. She seems to like musicians. We'll talk about that.
Polly's grandfather, yeah.
Yeah, Polly's grandfather was a musician, and he did leave, but Polly's grandmother was pregnant with Polly's mother, or with Polly's father, at the time of the 9 year sacrifice. She could have gone to Miles Cross and waited for him, and a very classic Tamlin story, but she didn't know the story, so she couldn't do it.
Which is actually, we haven't seen Jones do that in a while, have we?
No.
This is actually a book where you need to know the story to solve the book.
Except you need to, it's more complicated than we've ever seen her do it.
Yes.
Because you need to know the story, but you need to know all the stories.
You need to know all the resonances and the ways they interact. You need to know the ways they don't work. You need to read the bloody Golden Bough.
You need to read the Golden Bough, and you need to know where the stories are wrong. Because Tam Lin, it turns out, we'll talk about it when we get to the end, doesn't quite unlock the story. It's a little bit of a lie that it does. The lesson that Polly needs to learn is sort of, it's there, it's the thing and the opposite thing. The ending is Tam Lin, and it's the opposite of Tam Lin. But I do think that the fact that Granny is a Janet, is had a child, could have claimed her Tamlin and didn't. And that child is Polly's father, who his besetting sin is he lives in a land of make believe always. He will not tell the truth because he is too afraid of upsetting people. He creates a fantasy world for himself, which is one of the things that he and Laura and Ivy. I'm going to do that.
You're meant to do that.
Both have their flaws exacerbate each other. They make each other worse, but they create Polly, the child who Polly's grandmother could have saved her Thomas and didn't. And I do think that fate has come down a bit to Polly to bring her to Hunston House, to draw her in, to make her the fated person who can save Tom, because heroes are fated. That's
true. Heroes are chosen. They are special. They are picked out. And at the same time, Jones is quite firm, a hero can be in everyone and every woman. A Polly.
Yes.
Many. And for me, one of the most touching moments in the book is actually quite late in the game when Polly realizes that one of the boys she knows, Leslie Piper, who is son of this who is in fact Tom's nephew, has already been chosen out by Laurel as her next victim. But Leslie has a girlfriend, and that girlfriend is Polly's old friend Nina. And Polly realizes, I should warn Nina. I should have warned Nina and told Nina to hold on to Leslie, because Polly instantly sees that Nina could be a Janet. Polly's own mother, Ivy, the way her love for Reg manifests is trying to hold on to him and cling to him, which is the Janet move, right? Hold him and don't let go. Every one of these women who is an echo of Polly could be the Janet hero, but also there's something not quite right about that model of heroism, about just holding on.
Yeah, should we talk about Nina? I really want to talk about Nina.
How long have we got in this session?
I would say we've got about 20 minutes, and then the rest for next time. So
let's talk Nina.
So Nina is, Polly, as you've said, has two friends, Nina and Fiona. Nina is there from the beginning of the book. Fiona comes in later, and that's important. When the book begins, Polly and Nina are friends because Nina is a type that we've seen in various books before. She is, I think, an echo most directly of Nan in Witch Week. She's plump, she has glasses, she has frizzy hair, she has an enormous imagination. And Polly is jealous of her. Polly admired and envied Nina desperately, both Nina's looks and her bold, madcap disposition. Polly at the time was trying to eat a packet of biscuits every day in order to get fat like Nina.
I gotta say also, I think Nina's probably not white. I think this is another case of non-white, non-protagonist friend. Just because it's such a small detail. You go to Nina's house and it smells of spices, and I'm like, in England in the 80s?
Oh,
anyone's cooking the spices. I think probably that and just details like the frizzy hair, the house full of spices. I think this is probably meant to be a non-white girl.
Oh, I did not pick up on that, but I think you're probably right. Which makes some of the stuff with Nina a little bit more interesting, a little bit more problematic.
Yeah.
But the other thing important about the early dynamic of Polly and Nina, Nina has these wild games of make-believe, and she pushes Polly into them and says, if you don't do this, I won't be your friend. And Polly says it was not really that she was afraid Nina would stop being her friend, though she was a little. It was more that she could not seem to break out of her prim, timid self in those days and be properly adventurous without Nina's threats to galvanize her. So Nina is what pushes Polly towards heroism, towards everything that pushes that happens in the rest of the book. We've said that multiple times. And in the other set of memories, she's quite startled to realize that she's forgotten Nina almost entirely. In her boring memories, Nina is not there past their elementary school days. And when she meets Nina on the street, Nina's like, why are you talking to me? We haven't spoken. Why are you suddenly interested in me now? Despite the fact that she and Nina are not really that close friends throughout the rest of the book, they keep intersecting with each other's lives, but they don't always get each other. They're kind of at cross purposes to each other. But the thing about Nina that I think is really important is that Nina is never ashamed of anything.
Right. Nina, by the late book, is clearly like, is the 1980s. She's gone alternative. She's dyed her hair green. She's wearing weird clothes. She's got a cool boyfriend. She's a cool person, but also she's totally shameless. She knows what she wants and she's never ashamed of what she wants, which earlier in the book, we get Nina hitting puberty in earnest before Polly does, and suddenly going boy crazy, and being mocked by her classmates and called Nympho Nina. And she doesn't care. She
She
knows
doesn't
what
care.
she
She doesn't
wants.
stop.
And I think actually the book is remarkably kind to Nina with her strangeness, her shamelessness, her aggressive sexuality, her flirtatiousness, her courage, because shame is an important part of the way that Laurel eventually takes control of Polly and tries to prevent her from being a hero. Shame is the opposite of heroism, because if you're a hero, you have to be prepared to feel a bit silly.
Yes.
So
And
Nina's shamelessness is heroic, and to keep Polly out of heroism, it's necessary that she forget having a friendship with Nina.
yes, absolutely. And I think you said something really important earlier when we were talking about this book, which is that despite the fact that there is a thread of sexual menace running, from men that runs through this book very subtly towards Polly at all times, all the direct harm, all the direct damage comes from women controlling Polly. It is her mother kicking her out of the house because she is blaming Polly for the way that David Bragg is acting. It's Laurel who makes Polly feel ashamed of hanging on to Tom. It is her father's stepmother who, the worst moment in perhaps Polly's entire life comes after her mother has kicked her out. And she goes, she says, "Your father's going to have you." And her father has expressed an interest in having her. But Polly gets to her father's house where her father has a new wife who has a white house and a white rug that you can't bring food on in case it gets on the carpets. And it becomes very clear that he has not told his new wife that Polly is coming to stay, that she has no idea that Polly is coming to stay, and that subsequently, when it becomes clear that she doesn't want Polly to stay, she did, that she would never want Polly to stay. Both Polly and her father are too ashamed to say anything about it, and so her father lets her leave. She has no money, she has no ticket, she has no way to get home.
She has no home to go back to. Ivy's kicked her out.
And so I forget whether she's 11 or 12 at this point, but she wanders the streets of Bristol by herself until she comes to a bridge.
The Clifton Suspension Bridge, which is a famous suicide spot.
Yes.
And Polly knows it's a suicide spot because her father was telling her the ghost stories about it earlier in the visit.
And she stands there and she wonders whether the girl who wanted to jump was feeling something like this. And she stands there for a long, long time. And the only reason that she doesn't jump, I think it's pretty clear, is that she sees Mr. Morton Leroy standing at the edge of the bridge, enjoying the idea that she will.
Right.
But it's shame that brings her there. It's because she is too embarrassed and proud to tell her father that she has no money and no way to get home, to tell her father's wife that she was expected to stay, that this was going to be her home, to tell her mother that her father doesn't want her. There's all of these forces of sort of shame
Right.
and pride
It's
acting on her.
shame, but also it's being unloved, and it's the moment at which Polly feels most unloved and most unwanted in the whole book, when it's really clear that there's nobody who's willing to fight for her or to hold on to her.
Yes.
At this point, that her father is absolutely not going to put a toe out of line to interfere with his new girlfriend's perfectly organized life for Polly's sake. That her mother will always choose her latest lodger over her daughter. Will always regard Polly as a threat. There's nobody who wants her,
Which
and
is not
nobody who
true.
loves her.
Her
Which
grandmother
is,
wants her and loves her, but in that moment, it's true.
in
Um,
that moment, it's how she feels, and she's been totally failed by her parents.
and I go for it.
What saves her is that she knows Tom.
Yes. I think this is the moment, for all we've said about the fact that Tom is using Polly, he is, and it's uncomfortable. It is. I think it's pretty clear that in this is the clearest moment that knowing Tom, that having someone like Tom in her life throughout her adolescence is what saves Polly in a very real way.
It's having someone who does genuinely love and care about her, and I think that's really important. That I'm not sure if Tom intends to love and care about Polly when he starts out. He's in it to save himself.
Yes.
He's doing this to save himself. He lets her steer, which is partly maybe an equalizing move, but equally letting Polly be in charge of their relationship is a way to figure out who she is and what she wants and how he can get what he wants from her.
Yeah.
Um, but by the time they encounter each other in Bristol, I think Tom does love Polly. How? Question mark. Should he? Big question mark. But he does. He loves her. He's the only one who thinks of calling her grandmother. And
Yes.
Granny has always been pretty firmly anti-Tom. uh, but Tom is not ashamed.
Yes. And Granny, and this is the moment after this that Granny says, I'm ashamed. Your Tom, who I've always mistrusted, behaved better than my Reg. He was a better father to you that day. And future
Mm-hmm.
husband.
A kind of father husband figure.
Yeah.
But is it after the Bristol sequence as well that we get the embrace between Polly
Yes.
and Tom? That's where it
Yes.
is. When they part after that, and Tom gives her a weird little hug on the train platform and puts his hand in her hair. And that, I think, is the moment of transition, if you like,
Yep.
from father to husband.
Yep.
And they both feel it, I think, because after that is when Tom starts trying to push Polly away.
Yes. And when Polly starts going through puberty and starts trying to pull Tom closer. But the other thing that happens in Bristol that we need to talk about is the monster, because this is the most overt magic that happens in the book. It is when they are in Bristol, when Tom is trying to get Polly to the train station so she can go home to her grandmother, that they are chased by a monster out of their stories, which is so. Oh, we haven't talked about the quartet.
I know. God, I kind of. Can we, like, pin in the monster, discuss the
Yes,
quartet, come back to
yes,
the monster, possibly
absolutely.
next session because we're a bit short on time now.
Yes,
Because the quartet is, I think the quartet is actually Tom's second attempt to save himself,
yes,
and maybe in every way, it's a more admirable attempt to save himself. It doesn't work, and it was never
yes,
going to work.
yes,
Uh, but Tom, from divorcing Laurel, he is a cellist. He's a musician. People made fun of us for talking about the quitter in Cart and Quitter as a cello. They're right, it's not. It's probably a crotta, which is a traditional Welsh musical instrument. But I do think cello, question mark, is fair because Diana Wynne-Jones is crazy about cello music. Anyway, Tom is a cellist. He plays in the British Philharmonic Orchestra. And it's clear Polly actually gets glimpses of them sort of on their world tour, and she gets glimpses of the audience. It's clear that Laurel and Morton are keeping tabs on Tom. He hasn't actually escaped them. I think it's implied that they got him this job.
yes,
Tom then chooses to leave the orchestra and sort of strike out on his own with a quartet. But the
yes,
reason he chooses is he asks Polly for help.
yes. He's already kind of picked out some people he thinks would be good members of the quartet. And, I think it's important about the cello. The cello is not a solo instrument. It's hard to be a solo cellist. Tom cannot ever rescue himself by going and becoming a famous solo cellist. But they've been making up this game. Polly has decided that Tan Cool has three friends: Tan Thayer, Tan Hanavar, and Tan Odell. She knows all about Tan Thayer and Tan Hanavar. She can pick out exactly what they look like. She knows nothing about Tan Odell. And so when the second time that Polly comes to visit Tom, this is in fact the time he brings her to meet his girlfriend, and it's weird. But the first thing that he does is put down in front of her a picture of the Philharmonic and say, "Can you find Tan Thayer and Tan Hanavar and Tan Odell?" as a joke.
And she finds the first two really easily. She picks out two violin players, one after the other, like, that's him. Because, of course, the world of the imagination is not just the world of the imagination, especially in Tom's world, where he's got this gift of telling truth, whether he means it or not. Polly can identify Tom's fellow heroes, but she still can't find Tan Ordell.
And then Tom says, "Did you ever think it might be a woman?" Polly has never thought it might be a woman. Polly has no models for female heroism. I think that's really important. Tan Odell, who is Tom's friend Anne, who we think is probably a lesbian.
I think, yeah, because, like, interestingly, Anne is the only person whom Polly is ever positive about Tom, like, having any kind of relationship with. Polly's like, could you marry her? And
like, she's not into that.
She has her own ideas about such things. I think it's not really that subtle. I think Anne is pretty clearly a lesbian.
But the Tan Odell, Anne is a blank in her mind. She cannot imagine such a person. She cannot imagine a girl hero. When she imagines herself as a hero, she has to imagine herself as a girl pretending to be a boy. And then we get and Tan Odell is a really striking figure in the book. She's not in the book very much, but she plays a sort of unique role. Again, as you said, it's sort of the only positive relationship that Tom has with a woman outside of with Polly. arguably. Um,
Question mark, question mark, question mark, what the
and
fuck?
she's also kind of betwixt and between. Her gift is memory. We find out that that's her heroic gift. And so,
It also is in the real world her literal magical gift. She is a Leroy. She is one of this magical fairy family,
right,
half on her mother's side, enough that it's actually Anne's memory that originally triggers Polly's recovery of her memories in the first chapter as a story by Anne. Or as it
yes,
turns out, not by Anne, but with Anne's name still on it, that
right.
starts the cascade of there's something out of place here.
Like Polly, Anne is sort of a little bit in between in a bunch of different ways. She's not 100% one thing or another. And so that's another echo in the book. I don't think they're a threesome with Anne. I think that most of the echoes come in threes. I think Polly and Anne are just echoes of each other.
I
Uh,
think you're right.
but Polly can't imagine her. She doesn't know that there's an echo that this could be.
Right, Tom has to tell her that imagine a woman.
Yeah,
It's one of the few times it's very clearly Tom in charge of directing Polly's imagination. But the minute he does, like, oh, it's her! I
yeah,
see her! I get it now!
yeah, yeah. And so that's the quartet. And so Tom leaves. And I do think there is something about. I meant to talk about this with regards to the pictures too. One of the things that I think we've seen Diana Wynne Jones be really interested in is the sort of the way creativity influences each other across the way the metaphors work across boundaries, across art and music and writing and theater. All these things feed into each other. The pictures influence the stories that Polly is telling, influence the real world. The music
Mm-hmm.
that Tom plays, the fact that he is a musician, is one of his heroic attributes. There's a really beautiful bit where Polly is in a play. She's playing Piero, and there's I know we don't have much time, but I really, really feel the need to read it out because I think that this the way that Polly is in the play is a metaphor for the way Diana feels when a book is going right. So they have the dress rehearsal, everything's going wrong, and then the second night, Polly turned slowly through Piero's first cartwheel with her legs dropping just as they should, and she had a sudden sense as she turned that she was part of a transparent, charmed pattern in which everything had to go in the one right way because that was the only way it could go. She came out of the cartwheel and went on her knees to Kirsty Jefferson, who's the girl playing Columbine, her love interest, with her drooping sleeves imploringly raised. The violin sang along, and the audience began going, oh, half jeeringly at Piero, but half on his side too. They went on doing it, and that was right as well. The pattern had been there always, even though they were all making it just at that moment. That's art.
Yeah. And that is also Polly's heroic gift, which is the gift of not just pretending, but being.
Yes, both at once.
Let's stop there for this session.
Yes, we'll be back.
And we'll come back and we'll talk about the monster next time.
Sounds good. See you in 2 days. The rest of you will hear this in like 2 seconds. Hello, and we are the same as we were. You've been listening to this the whole time. It's 2 seconds for you. It's 2 days later for us. And I have accidentally locked myself in the room where I record. So I can't leave until we figure out the ending of Fire and Hemlock.
There will be no escape until you understand Fire and Hemlock.
Completely and in its entirety. It's fine. No problems ever.
You live there now.
It's true. We're just going to keep doing this forever.
Okay, it does actually feel really weird to be recording in a second session because normally what we do is record in a single session, 90 minutes, at the end of which we go, oh my god, we didn't even cover that.
Right. But this time I've made a list. I've made a list of we didn't even cover X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and we're gonna get to all of them, and it's gonna be great. But I remember where we left off. We left off with monsters. We left off quite literally with Tom and Polly being chased by a monster made out of newspaper down the streets of Bristol.
Right, because we were talking about the quartet, and we were talking about the monster, and we were talking about the Bristol episode, which I think is central to the book, is a real turning point in the book. It's the emotional turning point. It is the moment when Tom, if you like, slips firmly from father to husband.
Right. It's the moment when Polly starts calling Mr. Lynn, her weird adult friend, Tom, a person that she thinks she might be able to relate to as an equal, despite all the strong efforts that Mr. Lynn has been making at that point beforehand to try and put the ball in her court, try and keep their relationship one in which she holds as much power as she wants. And this has been very uncomfortable for both of them, and it's now about to become very uncomfortable in the other direction as Polly's like, yes, I am an equal. Let's be in a romantic relationship.
Right, we'll get
I'm
to that
for
in a second. Let's talk about the monster. You wanted to talk about the monster.
Right. So I think this monster is really interesting. It's the first time that we get the something that unambiguously is magic interfering in this book. The previously we've seen the things that Polly and Tom make up have come true in sort of weird, strange, and plausible coincidences, but nothing that is actively supernatural. You know, they go to a town and they see the shop that matches the shop that they've described to be the secret background for Tan Cool, the hero figure that they had made up. But it's an ordinary shop, it's a very normal shop, and in fact, this shop turns out to have a normal explanation, which is that Tom's older brother has been secretly living there and
Is
changed
that a
his
normal
name.
explanation? Are you sure?
Right, maybe it's not normal, but it is a sort of a non-supernatural explanation because it's revealed eventually that Tom Piper is Tom's older brother and that Laurel has sort of put him there as part of the bargain. This is all something that could happen as just part of the weird conspiracy and the weird hold and control that Laurel and the Hunsden house are trying to exert over Tom's life. There's a version of this book that's all gothic where there is no supernatural explanation for that. The horse gets released, the horse that echoes the horse that they've made up for Tancool, that echoes the horse in the painting. Horses get released all the time. Maybe not all the time, but
It's probably
again,
not the commonest thing to happen, but it's just about within the realm of plausibility that there is like a rampaging horse running through the streets of London. I mean, this has actually happened. I can find you a news story. It's not
exactly.
usually and it's escaped from the circus, but it's just about within plausibility that there is that the world is ordinary. And I think that's
But
important to like the nowhere now here, the double memories, the double world that Polly lives in, that there is a totally ordinary explanation for everything.
right, and part of I think the magic of Nowhere Now Here is being able to see the magic in the ordinary. There's this really lovely description of Polly's grandmother gives her an opal early in the book, and this opal is significant in a number of ways. But the way that she describes it is she's told Polly that opals were really a thin slice out of a certain kind of rock, bent over a crystal to bring the colors out. If water got between the rock and the crystal, the colors went out. So that made me sort of look at everything that happens in this book. Anytime Polly is sort of looking at the world and thinking, well, here's where the magic is, here's where it isn't. As, you know, now here is sort of or nowhere is sort of the crystal that goes over the rock, right? But the reality of the rock is there, and then you put the slice of crystal, you put the magic over it to make you see it in a certain way. That way is magical. And that's often what feels like is happening with these supernatural incidents that are only seem magical because of the way that Polly and Tom know to look at them. They know to look at them through the realm of fiction because it matches the fiction that they've made up. But the newspaper monster is different. So they're walking through the streets. They're trying to get Polly out of town. She has to go home to her grandmother. This is after the horrible sequence with her father where he's essentially abandoned her. And it says, her dreamlike feeling at once became the feeling of pure nightmare. For a moment, as you do in nightmares, she could not move. In the middle of the dark little street, the pattering rubbish was slowly piling upon itself, floating slowly and deliberately into a nightmare shape. It could have been a trick of the wind, but it was not. It was too deliberate. Plastic cups, peanut packets, leaves, and old wrappers were winding upwards, putting themselves in place as parts of a huge bear-like shape. As Polly watched, a piece of newspaper rose like a slow ghost to make the creature a staring face. Tom seized her wrist while she stared and pulled her away among the tower buildings. They did not exactly run, but they went in long strides as fast as they could walk. Both of them kept looking back. The creature of rubbish was following, billowing on pattering man-like legs. This is not something that could be explained away at the end in the sort of like conspiracy theory breakdown of this book. This is magic.
Right. This is, I think, the moment where it's clearest that the nowhere, the magical layer is, if you like, the true layer underneath.
Yes. And not only is, but it is, not just is it magic, the way in which it echoes the stories that Tom and Polly have been writing this time is that they have written that one of Tom's friends has a terrible habit of changing shape when he doesn't want to. And so various of his friends almost kill him frequently because he's always changing shape into monsters. So they're pursued through the streets by this horrible creature made up out of text made up out of old, thrown away
Oh,
texts.
I didn't catch that. Yeah. Okay, carry on.
And then at the end, after they fight it, they have to fight it to get away. They hit it with the car, and then it turns out that they've hit his friend from the quartet with the car. This monster that was pursuing them was, whatever layer of magic it was, seems to have been to make the one of the heroes look like a monster and make them feel like they were being chased by someone who meant them well, which I don't really know how to unpack that, but I think it's really interesting in terms of these sort of layers of power
Right,
and pursuit.
there's a slippage, I think, because I think it's pretty clear that the monster is an actual threat. If they had turned around and gone, "Oh, Sam, it's you," they would have been in
Right,
very deep trouble.
right,
The monster is the work of Mr. Morton Leroy, who is using the magic of that layer of fiction, that hidden world, Polly and Tom's world, against them, and that is something Morton Leroy does again and again. And in fact,
right.
comes back in the fairground sequence where, again, it's an act of fiction, of Polly's fiction, that comes to life in the worst possible way.
Yes.
Uh,
We have to talk about that fiction of Polly's,
yes.
because it's one of the most, I think, striking and significant parts of the book. But the other thing I'll say about this sequence is I do think this image might possibly come out of the Fairy Queen again. The
Go
very
on.
first monster that the hero, the Knight Red Cross, fights in the Fairy Queen is made up in part out of heresy pamphlets. Um, because Fairy Queen is a religious allegory. So I don't necessarily think that these newspapers and old rubbish bins are heresy. I think possibly she just thought it was a cool image and stole it a little bit. And it is a cool image. It's very haunting. But I do think the fact that this is a monster out of text that chases them through the streets that they have made up out of their texts is not subtle.
Right, it's pretty clear how the magic is working. It's like a fairly straightforward explanation of how magic works within the world of Fire and Hemlock. It works through text, out of text. It works through seeing the layer of the story laid over the mundane reality. And it's not that the reality is the wrong word. The layer of the story is what's real.
Yes.
It actually, which reminds me of what you said about Archer's Goon, actually, that sense of the real world, and the Bristol sequence is very, very rooted in the real world.
Yes.
Even more so than the rest of Polly's life. I think we've got a specific city, we've got specific streets. Jones lived in Bristol for a lot of her life.
Yes.
And it's Bristol that Polly is moving around, this particular real place. You could follow her journey on a map. You could move through this landscape. You could reach the Clifton Suspension Bridge and the suicide spot.
Yeah.
That world is actually the one that's sort of cracking apart to reveal the truth underneath, which is made of
Yes.
text.
Yes. And at the end, when they are leaving, so this sequence, I think, also because like we've said, it changes the dynamics in a couple of ways because they've now experienced something. Tom has rescued her. That's unambiguous. He's saved her from this horrible fate of just sort of wandering around Bristol forever, feeling completely alone and unloved. She has started to think of him as an integral part of her life. She started calling him Tom. Also, at the end, they fought this monster together, this unambiguous monster, so they know that something that links them together is more than normal, right? They have this connection of that is unambiguously magic. And at the end of this sequence, this also is where she has her first long conversation with Seb, who is the sort of the other main figure that ties her to Hunston House. So we haven't really talked much about Seb, but he is a child, and he's the other child in the funeral. He's the son of Morton Leroy. He's about 2 years older than Polly. I forget whether he's 2 or 3 years older.
I think he's 3 years older because I think he's meant to be in sort of fourth form, so 15 when she's 11, 12.
Yes. And so at the end of this sequence, when Tom is sort of trying to rush her on the train and get her out, they've had, and Tom actually, he hits his friend with the car. And he doesn't, once he's realized that he's hit with the friend with the car, he doesn't stop. He's like, I have to get you to the train station. I think my friend will be fine. I hope my friend will be fine, but worse things will happen if I don't get you to the train station. Let's separate and break the magic first. So they both are like, okay, this is the most important thing that's happening. And at the train station, they run into the Leroys.
Is
And
that before or after the embrace? I think the embrace at the train station is incredibly important.
You're right. The embrace happens. And then I believe at the time, I'm trying to remember what order does it happen? Is it at the time of the embrace and then Mr. Leroy comes up No, it's he embraces her after. He embraces her when he's putting her on the train.
Mm-hmm. And mashing her face into his anorak and his hand in her hair, and that I think is the first moment of like explicitly this is a romantic relationship. Tom might not want it to be, but it
Yes.
is.
Yes. And that's when he puts her on the train with Seb because they run into Mr. Leroy and Mr. Leroy says, "Oh, my son's also just up from London." And why doesn't he see her home to her grandmother? And so Polly gets on the train with Seb. Is this now? Now I'm doubting myself.
No, this is now, because this is when probably this is when Seb falls in love with Polly.
Yes. And she's no, you know what? No, I'm wrong. It's earlier. It's earlier that she gets on the train with Seb, I think. Seb does start following her around after this, but there's an earlier trip to London where they run into Seb. It's after the trip where she meets Anne, where they run into Seb.
Okay, so that's no, that makes more sense, because you wouldn't really want to spoil the moment of connection at the end of the Bristol sequence with
No,
the other boyfriend.
the other boyfriend.
Let's talk about Seb. Let's talk about Seb. So, as well, Polly has a lot of suitors in Fire at Hemlock, which
Yes.
makes sense because, among other things, she is the Fairy Queen, or a double of the Fairy Queen. And one thing the Fairy Queen always has is men hanging around admiring her.
Yeah.
So Polly,
Yes.
from the beginning of the book, as well as attracting the sexual interest of adult men, which she clearly does, is attracting the interest of boys her own age, or rather not her own age. I don't think boys Polly's own age even exist in this book.
No. Well, Leslie,
unless she's playing football with them.
No, Leslie is Polly's own age. But Leslie, and we'll talk about Leslie as well, but Leslie and Polly don't really, like, he's not really her suitor, she's not really his. They're parallels in a very different way.
Right. But Seb turns up from very early on. He's in that funeral in the first chapter. Tom talks about not being able to get him out in a way which takes on a double meaning later on. And then Seb starts, after the funeral, basically straight away, Seb starts following Polly around, and it becomes clear that he's been set to watch her. It's like,
right.
From the moment that Polly was at that funeral, she has got the attention of Laurel and the powers of Hunsdon House. They're always watching her from the time she's 9 or 10. Like, there's never a point at which Tom has really fully sort of slipped her past their gaze. So Seb is keeping a track of Polly, and we actually find out about this from Polly's friend Nina, who, as usual in the early part of the book, Nina is actually the impetus behind understanding that something weird's going on. And you can respond weirdly to it, and you can be frightened by it, and you can say this is not normal.
Nina is also the one who says to Polly all the time, "You're meeting up with strange men," and Polly's like, "These are not strange men. These are my friends. This is normal." And Nina's like, "This is not normal."
Right. So Nina believes that she's the one being followed because she's seeing Seb everywhere. And in a sort of reversal of their usual dynamic, Polly says, "Let's go and talk to him about it. Let's confront him." And they go and speak to Seb, and have you got the quote? Here it is. I've got it. So Nina and Polly talking to Seb, and they get onto the subject of basically, go to hell, leave us alone.
Yes.
And they have a little bit of like very childish back and forth because they're all children.
Right.
And it's mostly Nina taking the lead because she is actually the tough and cool one who comes up with cool comebacks in a hurry. She says, "Hell's not boring," Nina said smartly. She hated not being the center of attention. "There's devils with forks and flames and thousands of sinners. You won't have a dull moment when you go there." "I'm not planning to go there," Seb said. "I told you to shut up." "I'm planning not to," he said to Polly. "And I told you, you owe me."
Yeah. So from the beginning, and we already read out the quote at the beginning when Tom pulls Polly out of the funeral and says, "I would have got that kid Seb out too if he'd had the Seb, if he'd sat near the door, but I couldn't think of a way to do it." Tom and Seb both know that it's one or the other of them who's going to be the next one who gets sent to hell to extend the life of Morton Leroy. As it turns out, that's not 100% how it plays out. Seb is doomed to a different fate. But they're both aware, and Seb is a child. And they both look at Polly, like Tom identifies Polly as a way out, because she wanders into Hunsdon House and she gets herself entangled in this business, and that means that she can pull someone out. And Seb looks at Tom looking at Polly and is like, wait. No, I could do that. Um, that could be my way out. So Seb shows up mostly to warn Polly, but when they get put on the train together, and Polly expects Seb to ignore her because he's an older boy and older boys are not interested in girls of 11. But in fact, Seb seems determined to make conversation in a way that really confuses her.
And it's incredibly awkward. And
It's so
eventually,
awkward.
Polly sort of, in like a brainwave, is like, wait, I know one thing about Seb, which she does for reasons we haven't actually talked about. She's broken into his house, she's seen his bedroom. We'll come back to that.
Right.
Various Polly crimes have happened already. But Polly knows that Seb likes music. So he asks him one question. What bands do you listen to? What groups do you like? It's something like that. It's one question. And this is a 15-year-old boy who gets one bit of positive attention from this small girl who appears to be genuinely interested in something he cares about. And that is it for Seb. He is doomed to YA boyfriend status from that point onwards. He talks for a solid hour about the things he is interested in. Polly sort of nodding and smiling the whole time.
She never got a chance to ask anything, said the text. All Polly was able to do was nod and listen.
And at the end of this, he invites her to the school disco.
Yep. And she's like, oh my god, I'm going to the school disco with a 15-year-old boy, and goes into a full panic spiral about what you wear to a school disco that she in fact then never ends up going to. They have this, like, he is such a YA boyfriend. We're reading the text and we're like, he'd be a perfectly plausible YA boyfriend in like a Margaret Mayhew book, for example.
Right. This is Tom, but age appropriate. Like, yes, he is your spooky older boyfriend who's mixed up in something terrible and has a horrible debt to the fairy queen and needs to be rescued. But he's not in his 20s. He's more or less the right age for you.
But because, I mean, the book, so it's hard not to, as an adult, it's hard not to look at Seb sympathetically. Yeah. Polly thinks Seb is devastatingly boring. I know. At first, she sort of gets over the idea that, oh, cool older boy is interested in me. And then what he does is he turns up at her house and he's like, let's make out. And they make out and it's boring.
It doesn't do anything for her.
Doesn't do anything for her. And I also feel a great deal of sympathy for this. The descriptions of Polly putting up with Seb kissing her are, I remember feeling like this at 15 with my first boyfriend. Sorry to my first boyfriend.
One of the ways in which Polly does read kind of gay. Seb is really like tall, good looking, popular and important, like head boy of the fancy boys school, high status teenage boyfriend material.
Yes.
And he's wildly into her. That's really clear. He's constantly like talking to her, inviting her to things. Late in the book, at the time when Polly's 19, he's proposed to her. He suggests that they get married. Right. And like he's clearly really sincere and wants her all for himself in a way we'll come back to.
Yes.
But Polly's like, I just feel sorry for him. Like, she lets Seb kiss her because it's so awkward to tell him she'd rather not.
Yes, exactly. Again, sorry to my teenage boyfriend. I don't remember your name, but I do remember this emotion. But he's a bad, like, she does also kiss Leslie, and she's like, well, Leslie is the son of Tom Piper, so Tom Lynn's nephew, and he goes around kissing everybody, so he and Polly kiss. She's like, well, that's a bit nicer than kissing Seb, but, Leslie kisses everybody, so it doesn't feel as special. And then Seb's like, no, Polly, I must kiss you. I have a laser focus on you. But neither of them really do much for her. And I do think it's an open question whether Seb's focus on Polly, like, I do think it's at least 50% because he has identified her as, this is a way out. If I hang on to you, then I get you to hang on to me, then you can haul me out of Huntston House and I can live a normal life. I don't have to be doomed to go to hell. He says very early on in the book he's trying not to go to hell, and this is a way for it. But I do also think that he's genuinely attached to Polly. We see him arguing with his father a couple of times when his father has set up, a magical Polly trap, and we hear these ambiguous conversations between the Leroy men that are obviously meant to indicate that Seb is angry that his father has set up some kind of harm to Polly. So I do think
Seb tries to save her from various traps that his father has set, very seldom successfully, because Polly just doesn't listen to him.
Polly just doesn't care about him. She does not care about him at all. And So in the end of Reflections, the Book of Diana Wynne Jones essays, there's sort of a coda by her son Colin Burrows, who very clearly identifies himself as Seb. He says, I was into the Doors and I was into photography, and there's this sort of unpleasant character who shows up in Fire and Hemlock. And I guess to my mother at that point, I might have I was very into I was very fond of my grandmother, who my mother didn't like. And I suppose I must have seemed kind of chilly to my mother at that age, which is an interesting thing to think about when looking at this child that Polly at least does view very unsympathetically. I don't think the book necessarily views him unsympathetically.
I think the book feels quite sorry for Seb. Or rather, that we as adult readers, I find it really hard not to be sorry for Seb, who does indeed effectively go to hell,
Right.
who spends his whole adolescence clinging desperately to a girl who never really loved him and ends up betraying him and choosing someone else over him.
Yeah.
Like, poor kid.
Yeah, poor kid. But the difference between Seb and Tom, and I think the reason that Seb is never viewed as, never really has a chance at getting, at getting Polly to feel about him the way she does about Tom, is that Seb just holds on to Polly. He doesn't listen to her. He attempts, he sort of like lets, he makes romantic advances on her that she's not interested in and doesn't want. He doesn't let her come towards him. He doesn't let her take the lead in any way. He's
not
14.
interested in Polly as a person. Like, at no point,
right.
Like, Seb doesn't seem to know anything about her writing or her theatre, her art. Seb doesn't seem to know anything about the books she likes, the things she's passionate about. There's no actual connection except that he was a boy and she was a girl, and she's the girl who's there who could save him.
Right.
He's cast her as heroine, but not as Polly.
Yeah, there's this really interesting part where he takes photos. So Seb is into photography as well as music. Tom was also into photography, which is another mirror between them. There was a period of time when both Tom and his brother, I think it's mentioned briefly, were into photography, and they took a lot of pictures, some of which Laurel ended up later able to use. He takes pictures of Polly and her grandmother, and it says he'd done things with strong light and dark shadows that made Polly and Granny look like two white-haired witches. Well, you see, Seb explained to Polly, you're not beautiful or pretty, but your face is interesting, and I've brought out the interest. Which is a very funny bit of negging, first of all, from Polly, who is...
Because it's extremely clear that Polly is beautiful. It's very beautiful.
Right. Everyone recognizes Polly is beautiful. Seb was like, well, you're not beautiful, but you're interesting. You compel me somehow, strangely. And Granny says, when he's noticed that there are other people in the world beside himself, there might be no harm in Master Sebastian. But I'm prejudiced. He comes from that house. So there is a hint that, Seb's crime is that he is 14 or 15.
Yeah, he's a pretentious teenage boy of a type we've all met, I'm sure. All met, or some of us have been. And there's nothing wrong with being a pretentious teenage boy.
Yeah, but and he's also a pretentious teenage boy who has not learned about real love in any real way, right? Real love, real friendship. He has grown up with the Leroys. I mean, I guess we don't know what his mother was like, but we do know that his mother was sacrificed to keep his father and stepmother alive. So that probably was not particularly fun for him, or a particularly good model of forming a relationship.
Mm-hmm. I think the Polly's final word on Seb is that Seb loved like he was holding a grudge.
Yeah.
Which is this idea of love as something you cling to.
Yes.
Love as sort of a poison that sits in you. Ivy's kind of love, actually.
Yeah,
love like
you're right. Ivy and Seb are sort of mirrors in their own way. But he's not a romantic figure. In many other books, he would be a romantic figure, and in this book, he simply isn't. And the reason I wanted to link, I was wrong about when Seb starts high key becoming becoming romantically interested in Polly. But I do think that, to come back to the monster and the embrace, the section after that is when the book really starts, when Polly really starts becoming interested in romance, capital R. And it starts seeping into her relationship with Tom. It starts seeping into her creativity, into everything that she does.
Yeah.
Should we talk about sexy backs?
Let's talk about Polly's writing. So Polly is an artist in various ways, and actually I think some of the most compelling writing about art isn't about Polly's writing, it's about her performance,
Yes.
It's her theatre. But Polly also writes, because she has been making up these stories with Tom, the stories of Tan Cool and his adventures with his friends and his assistant hero. Polly takes on the role of the scribe, the storyteller, and starts to write the adventures down. And she's doing this from very, very early on in the story. And we do get, I have to say, I don't really enjoy the comedy misspellings child Polly
Yes.
storytelling, but we do get some of her early examples of storytelling and some of Tom's typewritten, accidentally on purpose typoed
Right.
responses. But by the time Polly is getting serious about this storytelling, we get what I found quite moving.
Yes.
A description of a little girl writing a really, really long fantasy book.
Yes.
Oh yes, this is familiar. This is what little girls do.
Yep.
Or at least all the ones I know, because everyone I know is a fantasy writer.
Oh, 100%. And it's so recognizable. She
reads Lord of the Rings and then writes a really, really long version of the story, which is just Lord of the Rings, but worse.
No, okay. So this is what happens first. Is she tells Tom they've made up the obisipt, which is this sort of MacGuffin that the heroes are questing after, and she writes a version of the story. This isn't the really big long one, but she does write a story in which the obisipt is the ring. Is a magic ring that they're questing after, and Tom writes back to her and says, "Stop reading Lord of the Rings. This is just Lord of the Rings." Which I do think it's very funny that this is a bit that I don't think this is a problem that Diana Wynne Jones had. Most of the writing bits, I think, are very clearly looking at the self, looking at Diana Wynne Jones' writing process. But I do think this is a call out of the various fantasy authors in the 80s who are just writing Lord of the Rings, because the 80s is when this is starting to happen. And she's very annoyed about it. We know that she has it in her essays.
I don't know. I think there is something to say about the way in which Tolkien's work does have a distorting effect on all the fantasy writing that's coming after it.
Yes.
And I don't know that Jones is completely immune. I think Diana Wynne Jones did feel called upon to write a long series set in a secondary world with a vast amount of her Old English scholarship sort of baked into the background.
Yes.
Just to, prove that she could do it.
Yes.
Just because she could do it well doesn't mean she was not also doing the thing.
All right, fair point. But then she starts writing the big one. The passage where she decides to do this says, remembering how scornful Mr. Lynn had been at her borrowing from Tolkien, Polly decided to let her imagination take her where it would. All she knew at the start was that it was an account of how Hero came to be Tan Cool's assistant, and then their quest together for the obisipt. The result was that the story got huge. Small extra stories sprouted off it everywhere, giving detailed histories of every character who appeared. Hero herself became a king's daughter who had to run away from home because of the machinations of her beautiful but evil girl cousin. Tan Cool found her wandering in disguise and made her his assistant, thinking she was a boy. From there, it became an epic. Polly was writing it most of that school year, almost until her 14th birthday, on and off, with numerous interruptions from real life. Most of those interruptions are Seb. The next bit I have quoted is Polly was continually trying to get rid of Seb, or at least evade his grabbing and kissing her. So she's writing romance.
Please stop snogging me. I am trying to write my 700,000 word epic.
Exactly. She is inventing romance in her fiction, and romance in real life is an annoyance and an interruption.
Mm-hmm. But meanwhile, in fiction, Tan Cool and Hero are having quite a time.
Oh, yes. She's also, this is around the time that she's acting in 12th Night. She's desperate to play the part of Viola, but that instead goes to Christy Jefferson, the prettiest girl in school, who's only relevant in that Polly and Nina both have big crushes on Christy Jefferson. So but she does learn from Shakespeare. She says, Shakespeare, she discovered, borrowed plots for his plays from all over the place. So there, Mr. Lynn. It's legal to borrow.
Take it from Tolkien if I want.
The longer she spent copying, the more she admired it. Some parts were really good. The part in particular where Tan Cool is wounded in the shoulder and Hero has to dress the wound. She strips off Tan Cool's armor and sees the smooth, powerful muscles rippling under the silken skin of his back. Wonderful! Polly went round whispering and admiring to herself.
Oh God, okay, this... I'll tell you what this makes me think of, and Ellen Montgomery, Emily of Newburgh.
Yeah.
Which is also a book featuring a relationship between a young woman who dreams of writing and a much older man who sort of guides her development creatively and also judges her development creatively. But Polly, like Emily of New Moon, has gone head over heels into something I think perfectly natural for a 13-year-old girl.
Yep.
She likes the sexy stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Like, she's got this character who's very handsome and very cool, and she's very brave and very exciting. And then her character gets to take his shirt off.
And they do a little Hurt Comfort. It's a classic.
Yeah, it's a classic for a reason.
Yep.
But also, Polly writes her good copy of her epic, and as she has always done for years now, she sends what she's created to Tom. Now, I want you to imagine you are Tom, age, what is he, 25, 26 at this point?
Yep.
You receive this gigantic 700,000 word epic.
Written by a 13-year-old.
A 13-year-old girl who you befriended some years ago, writing her self-insert fanfiction about how she got to take your shirt off.
Yep.
This, I think, is the point at which Tom goes, "Oh shit, am I a monster?"
Yep. And so...
And he's right, this is an oh shit moment.
1,000%.
Because this is a confession on Polly's part. Not just that she loves him, which I think is already clear, but that she's sexually attracted to him. She's into him. She's obsessed.
Yes.
She is getting rid of her boyfriend and trying to get out of his rights to write more story about her and Tom.
Yes, and what she actually says to Seb when she gets rid of him is, "You just don't know what I'm like. I told you to stop bothering me. Go away and don't come back for a year. I'm too young," she says to Seb, and then sends the 700,000 word epic to Tom Lynn. And Tom Lynn writes back 2 words: sentimental drivel.
And that is actually the Emily of New Moon chime to me, because that's what Dean says to Emily. He accuses her of sentimentality, which is possibly the most brutal thing a man whose opinion you value could say to a young woman.
Yes, and she's furious. She stomps around. She imagines him breaking his cello. She imagines stomping on all his cellos. She gets news several days later that he has broken one of his cellos.
Yeah, because she's got... But there's a magic in their relationship that what they dream of comes true, and where Polly becomes angry and heartbroken, I think. Yes. She's rejected and it hurts.
Yes. And she does have... That gives her power to hurt, because Polly is also an echo of her mother and of Laurel. And she can hurt Tom. And this is sort of one of the ways in which the power dynamics in their relationship do roll back and forth, despite the big glaring one of the 12-year age gap, which is that Polly has a magic power and she can use it to wound and injure because of her hurt feelings. Because Tom is trying to do the right thing, which is distance himself from a 13-year-old.
Right. But also, that sentimental drivel is not just distancing. It is also, I think, a true, from Tom's point of view,
yes,
assessment of the work she's done.
Yes.
Which is true, that 13-year-old girls do quite often write sentimental drivel.
Yeah, so he...
I wrote so much sentimental drivel as a teenager.
So at this point, they're trying not to... They've had this elaborate game where they're trying not to write to each other too directly because the Leroys will find out. So Polly gets a letter back via one of Tom's friends from the quartet. I'm going to read out this letter. I think it's beautiful and terrible.
It's so brutal. Right.
Dear Polly, Tom wishes you, for reasons I can't understand, to consider the human back. He says there are many other matters you should consider too, but this was a particularly glaring example. He invites you, he says, to walk along a beach this summer and watch the male citizens there sunning themselves. There you will see backs. Backs stringy, backs bulging, and backs with ingrained dirt. You will find, he says, yellow skin, black heads, pimples, enlarged pores, and tufts of hair. This is making me ill, but Tom says go on. Peeling sunburn, warts, boils, moles, and midge bites, and floppy rolls of skin. Even a back without these blemishes, he claims, seldom or never ripples unless with goose flesh. In fact, he defies you to find an inch of silk or a single powerful muscle in any 100 yards of average sunbathers. I hope you know what all this is about, because I don't. I think you should stay away from the seaside if you can.
Honestly, that is such a weird letter to write to a 13-year-old girl, and an even weirder letter to make your friend write for you to a 13-year-old girl. But Tom feels he has to say it. It's not just that he's not just rejecting Polly's feelings like out of the goodness of his heart. He's rejecting the way she's approaching those feelings. This is not true.
Right. Because he's also his goal is despite the fact that he is, sort of taken alarm at the increasing romance in their friendship and is trying to squash that, he's still trying to shape her into the hero who can save him. And I think one of the things that Diana Wynne Jones believes about heroes, believes about the act of creativity as heroism, is that it has to be true. It can't be sentimental. And you were the one, I
Because
think, who said that this book is sort of a rerun on Dalemark.
yes,
And this is something we see throughout Dalemark. This is the quitter, the
truth,
muzzy sound of the quitter.
truth is the fire that fetches thunder. Yeah, that's the words for Dalemark. I do really feel that Dalemark is echoed all through Fire and Hemlock, not least
Yes.
in the underlying structure of the four quartets, which Jones explicitly points to as what she's working with in Fire and Hemlock, but which is pretty clearly, as we discussed last season after being pointed at it by a brilliant listener, pretty clearly what's going on with Dalemark as well. But also, I think in particular, Fire and Hemlock to me feels like Spellcoats over again and a little to the left.
Yes.
What I mean by that is that Spellcoats has the storyteller girl as the sort of central figure whose power to tell the story reshapes the story. And that is Polly's power also. But Spellcoats also has the story of the sad man who is bound.
Yep.
Tanamil.
The
Uh,
Piper.
Tanamil the Piper, yes. Presumably Tancool's little brother. No, I think Tanamil and Tancool must echo each other. And Tanamil has this romance that saves him, and it's a romance with the main character's older sister, Robin. And in Spellcoats, we get it all via the sort of the gap between Tanaqui and Robin uh, gives us the romance one step removed. Tanaqui
Yes.
is embarrassed by the romance. She doesn't quite get the romance. She thinks it's a bit strange, the romance. Fire and Hemlock puts us right in, if you like, in Robin's head, in Robin's place, as the young girl rescuing the ancient power.
Yes.
Tom Lynn is not quite as ancient a power as Tanamil, but I think that's also an age gap relationship.
Mm-hmm. And
And go on.
I do think that Tom would love if there could be two Pollys, right? If there's the romantic Polly who's already an adult and the brilliant creative child, because that's what Tanaqui is. Robin is not really the one who rescues Tanamil. Tanaqui rescues Tanamil with her writing, with her creativity, with her art. But there's
Who
no
gets to marry
question.
Robin? Who's
And
age
then he is age appropriate, and who is beautiful, and who is an appropriate. Even though there's an age gap there, she is an appropriate romantic interest. She's ready for marriage. But Fire and Hemlock puts those two people together in ways that are very uncomfortable for everybody.
including Tom, but not Polly. I think that's important. Polly is never uncomfortable with who she is, with what she wants, with her own desires. Polly knew from page one she was flirting.
Yes.
Um, Polly has always loved Tom. Tom's
Yes.
eventual admission that he's always loved Polly is weird as hell, but it's a
Yes.
victory for Polly. And this is a time, I think, when Diana Wynne Jones's commitment to taking children seriously as agents of their own narrative, as active and driving their own stories, can be really difficult for an adult reader to accept. Because she was 9.
Because she was 9. And there is, I think, so I'm going to take a quick zigzag and talk about Fiona, who is, because I think it's crucial to how Diana Wynne Jones is thinking about teens, teen sexuality, teen love throughout this book. So Polly has this friend, Fiona. She makes friends with her right at the point when all this is starting to go down with Tom, when she's about to have a break with Tom, which is important because that's going to be the link, the thread that allows her to pull Tom back into her life, to pull her memories back into her life later on, is that she has this new friendship that hasn't been sort of wound into the story of Polly and Tom. Diana Wynne Jones describes Fiona as sensible, unlike Nina, who's sort of getting, who's very fun, who's, has these big ideas, who's larger than life, who's shameless, but who's always doing kind of wacky things. Fiona and Polly are simpatico. They're both kind of late bloomers. They like similar books. They're both determined to go to university.
And they end up as roommates at Oxford.
It's a lovely friendship. there's sort of a reference casually in one of the intervening chapters to that weird thing that Fiona did when she was a teenager. And eventually we find out that what Fiona did when she was 15 is her father had a visiting German businessman, and Fiona fell passionately in love with him and ran away and followed him to Germany to try and get him to fall in love with her. And he, of course, sent her right back home to England. And this was the great wound and tragedy in Fiona's life, was that she had this passionate love for this German businessman who didn't speak English.
And she's the sensible one out of the
And
teenage girls
she's the
trio.
sensible one. She's the sensible one. Nina and Leslie, meanwhile, are kissing everybody, going off and having all kinds of flirtations, all kind of romantic encounters. Again, it's a bit silly, but the narrative looks at them very fondly. I think, and Leslie, who is Tom's nephew, is being cultivated by Laurel. Laurel, who was the older woman to Tom, has now become the older woman to Leslie. And it's a bit horrifying, and everyone's a bit horrified by this. But there's no shade on Leslie for this. I think that the book thinks it's, and it is normal, for teenagers to want to have sex with adults. This is a thing that teenagers do. It's not normal or good or appropriate for adults to want to or try to have sex with them back. But you have to make space for teenagers to want that, because they will want that no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's it. This book is interested in sort of asymmetric desire and asymmetric power, and the ways in which teenagers experience it, whether you like it or not, and what is the right adult response to it. It's
Yes.
like, if you think about someone like Polly's stepfather, David, and the sort of asymmetric desire between them, which in that case is mostly from David's end.
Right.
He's handling it wrong.
Yes.
Even though he never acts on the desire beyond giving Polly some uncomfortable compliments, which he's actually too young to realize are uncomfortable.
Right. She thinks it's a game.
Her mother realizes it's uncomfortable, and she blames Polly for it.
Yep.
But Laurel is essentially a serial abuser, a serial groomer. She picks boys, young boys. She builds them up into the person she needs them to be, and then she destroys them, which, coincidentally, not coincidentally, is exactly what Tom is doing to Polly.
Right.
He's picked a young girl and is raising her up into the person he needs.
Yep.
He's doing what Laurel did to him.
Yeah.
And the question is, so what exactly is the difference between a Laurel and a Tom?
Yeah. And I think there is something quite, it's the figurative moving to the literal, right? And what Laurel does to these boys. She targets them when she's teenagers. She steals their life metaphorically by taking their childhood, taking their future, and molding it to shape her needs and preferences. And then she takes their life literally by sacrificing them to hell.
Yeah.
But the theft has already occurred. She's, you see that in the difference between what Tom looks like in the photograph as a child who it seemed was going to grow up into someone sort of laughing and jolly and carefree, and what we see Tom as now, which is another abuser in the making.
Yeah. It's really dark, this book. I mean, obviously, duh. Yeah, this is such a completely useless thing to say as a point of analysis, but oh my god, it hits. And actually, I think the focus on Leslie as essentially a happy boy, right?
Yeah.
Every time we meet Leslie, he is cheerful, he is delightful, he's wonderful, and everyone loves him. His mother adores him because he's great. He has lots of girlfriends. They call him Sexy Leslie. They call him Georgie Porgy, which made me laugh a lot.
Yes.
Georgie Porgy, pudding and pie, kissed the girls and made them cry. Insofar as he has a serious girlfriend, it's Nina, which is seems like a nice parallel. These
right.
are two people who are happy in themselves, free to be themselves, however ridiculous that self is.
Right. Nina and Leslie, if they grow up and end up together long term, are going to be that gloriously polyamorous couple who are always bringing home new people to each other and having a wonderful time with it.
Right, that's really, really clear. But then Laurel involves herself in Leslie's life, and Leslie begins to get squirrely. He has secrets. He feels guilty. He tries to hide things. And we only see the very edges of this, but we see the ways in which Laurel's grooming of Leslie is changing him and, you're right, robbing him of the person he could have been.
Yes. And we see this, I think that Leslie and Polly are very clearly mirrored, and we see this in sort of the next major thing that happens after the sexy back sequence is the lead up, the lead up to the big break. It's the quartet invite Polly and well, they invite Polly out for lunch because they're going to make a CD and they're very excited and they want to celebrate. And the first thing they say is, Polly, bring a friend, bring an age appropriate friend. And Polly wants to bring Fiona. She can't bring Fiona. Fiona's got the chicken pox. So instead, Tom invites Leslie, an age appropriate friend. Um, and they both turn up and they all go together to an amusement park. And Polly, and Tom's girlfriend is there too, by the way. She's not having a great time. It's a weird experience. It's always a weird experience for poor Mary Fields. And Polly drinks some champagne, gets quite shameless, hangs on Tom's arm and giggles at him like she sees older girls doing. She's like, "Oh, I see why Nina likes to hang on people's arms. It gives you a chance to show them what a nice bosom you've got." This is clearly mortifying for everybody else. And Tom is very clearly trying to be like, go hang out with Leslie. Go do the tunnel of love with Leslie. And what Polly thinks, it's very clear that Tom is saying, Leslie's are for Polly's. This is an age-appropriate relationship. This is a parallel relationship. You two go off with each other and leave the adults alone. But unfortunately, Polly is obsessed with Tom and has also wound her fate in with Tom. So despite the fact that Tom was trying to shake her off throughout this whole time, they end up going into the haunted house together. And then the haunted house attacks them. And she has to save Tom from a portcullis falling down on his back, which injures it. And then she has to tend to his wound.
Because what Polly makes up through Tom's gift always comes true. So Polly is forced to confront the difference between the sentimental, romantic hurt comfort moment and someone you love just got very seriously hurt right in front of you.
Right. And in fact, what Tom says while he's bleeding out the back is, "You are now about to see a human back."
Oh, right. Tom is really hung up on this, and I think it also sort of points us to, try as he might, Tom is not disinterested. Tom is not able to shove Polly off onto an appropriate partner. Tom wants Polly to notice what's real about him. He doesn't want to be subsumed into her fantastic, her romantic Tan Cool figure. He wants Polly to look at his back and notice that it's just a normal bloke's back.
Yeah. "Tom, this looks awful," she says. And he says, "But how about the bit round the edges?" Tom said, almost jeeringly. And he's mocking both of them. He's mocking her for being sentimental about backs and having this romance idea in her head. And he's mocking himself for caring about what a 14-year-old thinks about his back. This is also the bit, by the way, where we find out when talking about Leslie, Tom says, "I feel responsible for Leslie having a weird time at school. I told his mother how good the music was there, but I didn't dream she'd take me seriously. I hated the place when Laurel sent me there." And Polly says, "Laurel sent you?" And Tom says, "My parents had died and we'd nothing. I was in council care when Laurel almost adopted me. I know how Leslie felt." He knows how Leslie feels. This is what was happening to him is happening to Leslie right now.
Mm-hmm.
And he has just made one very ineffective stab at pulling him out of it. Yeah, so they tend to the back, and then they get rushed away from each other because Tom has to go to the hospital.
In the company of Mary Fields, who is a nurse. Poor Mary Fields.
Poor Mary Fields. And Leslie and Polly are so mean about her. Leslie says, "I hate that Mary Fields." Leslie, what have you got against Mary Fields? I know what Polly has against Mary Fields, and Polly even thinks she hates her, but she knows she's nice. She's nice and she's normal. Although there is, again, a weird age gap relationship that goes on, because later on, shortly after this, Polly loses all her memory of Tom. When she's trying to find her memory of Tom again, she calls up Mary Fields. She says, because the way that Mary Fields and Tom got to know each other was Mary Fields bought the horse off Tom, the runaway horse that was part of their hero business. And she says, "Who sold you that horse?" And Mary Fields says, "Oh, Seb Leroy did. And why are you calling me up and asking me about my boyfriends?" So Seb has also been dating Mary Fields.
Well, Seb is trying to basically follow Tom's lead, I think, in how the hell do I get out of this?
Right. Well, maybe it's Polly, and maybe it's this horsewoman. I don't know. But there's every relationship in this book, I think, is mirrored between there's an age-appropriate one and an age-inappropriate one, and that's all happening at once. Between
But
the same
I
time.
do think that Seb is one thing Seb always is a mirror for his father, Morton Leroy. And what's clear is that Laurel uses Morton as a way to control other women. That, for example, she got Seb's mother, the sacrifice, start of the book, by temporarily divorcing, in quotation marks, Morton. So he went up and picked up another woman,
Yep.
and then that was the woman that they used to renew Laurel's eternal youth. That
Yeah, Laurel
Seb in
tragically
the same
heterosexual.
way, yeah, Seb in the same way is being used by the Leroys, by the fairy court, to control the women in Tom's life, to take control of Polly, to take control of Mary Fields, to keep an eye on them and to keep them in the orbit of Laurel and Morton. And in fact, in her post the break with Tom, Polly has memories of like meeting Seb's parents as his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And seeing Seb get congratulated by his father on this very clever idea. And of course, without her memory, she has no idea what's so special or clever about the idea of dating her. But in fact, Seb has done something clever,
Right.
getting Polly under his control for the fairy family.
And the other clever thing Seb does is the next thing that happens, which is so one of the other stories, there are so many stories underlying this. One of the other stories that we get told to us in detail is East of the Sun, West of the Moon, or the story of Cupid and Psyche, which is the story of a girl who has a magical boyfriend, which she can't look at too closely. And then her evil stepsisters tell her, but you should look at him. Just take a look. Just find out who he really is. And she does, and that ruins everything. And he's sent away from her, and she has to go questing after him again.
Yeah.
This is in a
I have to
book.
say the horrible pun involved in Cupid and Psyche.
Oh my god.
Which is in Jones's essay. She's like, yes, Tom is obviously Cupid. I mean, who is blind and goes to work with a bow? And you're like, Tom the cellist who wears glasses.
Yep.
It's terrible.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Diana. But Tom,
no matter how serious she's being, she's always joking.
Oh, 1,000%. Even this book is funny. It's excruciating. Most of the times it's funnier when it's excruciatingly funny, like with the backs. But it is funny. But Tom has sent Polly a book of fairy stories, and Polly, as younger at 11 or 12, is like, ugh, fairy stories. And Tom's like, read them. There's something true in all of them. And Polly reads East of the Sun, West of the Moon, and is like, I don't know what that's for, because I can't read. I'm trying. And then Seb comes to Polly after the incident with the back and the fun house, where they did, they very heroically rescued each other. And
Polly did get to see Tom with his shirt off.
And Polly did get to see Tom with his shirt off. Polly, I think, feels like this has pushed them apart, but I think it's in danger of bringing them closer. And so Seb says, why don't you ask Tom what's up with him, really? Why don't you just try and find out everything there is to know about Tom? Why don't you ask? He always calls him Old Tom, which is such a little, a pointed little bit. And Polly says he won't say. And Seb says, I told you he was obstinate, but you must know how to get round that. There are ways and ways of asking, aren't there? If you really want to know, you have to ask him the right way and make it impossible for him not to answer somehow. So Seb has stepped in and said, take his agency away, force him to tell you everything he knows about him. Steal this information. And Polly's like, yes, I will. I learned nothing from the stories that Tom has told me.
Right, but also this is an echo of the way Ivy seeks to possess every scrap of information about the men in her life. So this is what Polly's mother does to first Polly's father and then to her subsequent boyfriends, is try to control their whole lives by by knowing everything about them.
Yes.
And this is Polly's next move, her next desire. She wants to know everything about Tom.
Yes.
And I do think it's no, as in the euphemistic no as well. And I think that's quite strongly implied in the text, because Polly doesn't just go off and say, right, I shall find out everything about Tom. She's like, I should get some more advice. And she goes and asks Nina.
Right. And Nina, of course, says, Nina gives the rich chuckle she had cultivated to replace her giggle. If you mean anything like I think you mean, why not? Where's the harm? What's wrong with finding out things? Nina clearly thinks that Polly is talking about having sex with somebody. And is like, yeah, do it. Great. Nina doesn't know that what Polly is talking about is stealing knowledge non-consensually from somebody. which is what she does.
Mm-hmm.
And that destroys things.
Right. What Polly does is cast a spell.
Yes.
And this is the clearest moment we have of Polly as like precise echo both of Ivy and of Laurel. She is the witch queen trying to take total control of someone's life. And she does it by doing magic. She uses the little photograph of Tom, which she stole from Laurel. She uses the Fire and Hemlock picture, which she, as a photograph she acquired as part of those initial 6 pictures they took away from the house. One of them was a photograph of Fire and Hemlock, and Tom gave it to Polly to keep, and she's kept it ever since, hung up over her bed. This photograph is revealed to be, not at this point, Polly seems to instinctively know at this point, but we don't have it confirmed for certain later on. This photograph is part of a charm which Laurel created to control Tom.
Yep.
It has a lock of his hair hidden behind it inside the frame. It is, in fact, the Oberkipt, the quest object from the Tan Cool stories. It is the creation of sympathetic magic that's used to control
Yes.
Tom. And Polly uses
Yes.
that.
Yep. And she burns it all up in the state of greatest excitement. She remembered seeing her own face, vivid and almost laughing, reflected in the glass of the Fire and Hemlock picture, while she struck a match and lit one corner of the postcard that says sentimental drivel on it.
Ah!
She's burning the truth that Tom gave her, burning that up so that she can force truth. He gave her a truth. That's not the truth that she wants. She wants a different truth, and so she is burning that truth up to create the link between them so she can ask him for the real truth, which she doesn't get. The magic works, but she doesn't get answers. Instead, what she gets is, a week later, Laurel taking her aside and saying, "Poor Tom, he's been so embarrassed by you. You were a little girl, and children always adore poor Tom. You're embarrassing him. You got a crush on him, and he's going to die in about 4 years. So
Right.
can't you go away and leave him alone?"
Now, the thing is that all of this is true. Polly
Yes.
is very embarrassing. I think that's pretty clear at the amusement park sequence where she gets drunk. And also, I think the sentimental drivel, the romantic 700,000 word epic about Tan Cool and Hero and the shirtless couple.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. It's deeply embarrassing, and it is sentimental drivel. And Tom is going to die in 4 years because Laurel intends to kill him. But
The
that's
only thing
not
that
how Laurel works. Because what Jones says in her essay about this is Laurel is a type of person who we've seen. Everyone's met one of these. A woman who mixes fact and fiction impartially for her own ends.
Yep.
And the
Yep.
fiction that Laurel layers over the facts is Tom has cancer. It's incurable. How awful. How difficult for him in this really hard time that he's also got this embarrassing little girl hanging off him. How we all love him so much. How could you treat him this way? And this is sentimental drivel.
Yep.
This is playing on strong emotion to hide the truth. And I think sentimentality is something I think about a lot, something I worry about in my own work. And I think
Yes.
when you are, especially when you are dealing with the realm of the fantastic, it's very easy to tip over into pure sentimentality, which is when you are more interested in the aesthetic power of emotion than what you're actually saying with it.
Yes.
And Laurel's lie, her enormously sentimental lie, and like, oh no, he's got terminal cancer, how awful. This is
And all of the
sentimental
stalking that we've
shit.
been doing of him is just because we care about him so much
This,
because of the terminal cancer.
yeah, but this is all about like, oh, don't you feel terrible for him? But is this true? Is this what's actually happening? Is it what Tom wants Polly to hear or to know? No, because sentimentality is a way in which Laurel controls the narrative and
Yes.
prevents Polly from telling her own story and understanding what the story is actually doing.
Yes.
Sentimentality sort of floods the narrative, and I use flood advisedly. This is the image of death and water is coming back. It's always
Yes.
coming back. Sentimentality floods the narrative with falsehood, with distractions, and allows Laurel to make a bargain with Polly that she doesn't understand she's making. Laurel says, "Won't you promise to forget poor Tom?" And Polly is so embarrassed. She feels so silly. And that shame and silliness is one of the things she knows, has always known, that a hero needs to move past. But no, Polly feels so silly. She says, yes, I'll forget him. And that
And she does.
is why she has two sets of memories, because that is where Laurel moves from the ordinary, the now here abusive power, to the nowhere abusive power. That is Laurel's magic, that she can physically really make Polly completely forget that she ever knew Tom Lynn.
Yes, and what Polly says afterwards was she had done it to herself and deserved it all, even being engaged to Seb, for not having the sense to remember something Tom had said himself, that being a hero means ignoring how silly you feel. She had let Laurel embarrass her into a state in which she could not even think straight. She had been just like Ivy, a miser who thought her hoard was being taken away, and she had been after revenge because Tom had hurt her. And so then she has 4 ordinary years where she has no connection with Thomas Lynn at all.
And these are basically skipped over because there is no story there. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
Polly's life becomes empty without Tom in it. Well, not completely empty. I mean, she has a friendship with Fiona. She has an age-appropriate boyfriend in the form of Seb. She goes off to Oxford. Yep.
She accomplishes things. She has a career ahead of her.
But she doesn't have the underlying thread of magic which Tom put in her life.
And I think crucially, she has no art. We hear nothing about her creativity, her doing anything creative over the course of those 4 years. The previous part of the book is filled with various expressions of Polly's creativity. She's writing, she's doing theater. None of that happens in the next 4 years, even despite the fact that she and Fiona met doing theater.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. It disappears. The sort of the light, the magic disappears from her world, along with her love for Tom.
Yeah. Yep. But then she happens one day to be reading a short story by Anne, who is the one member of the quartet who has the power of memory, and who has a little bit of power because she's half Leroy or half Perry, and that's enough to start tugging on the thread that she then spends the rest of that then the book happens. That the story comes back.
Because almost all this book is told in flashback, and it's only in the very, very final sequence that we're actually acting in the present of story time.
So she does her detective work. She goes around and she tugs on every thread she can to try and get confirmation that Thomas Lynn existed, that he was real, that he wasn't just a product of her imagination. That thread ends up being Fiona, who never actually met Tom because she had chicken pox the day they would have met, but who, I think this is really cute, was obsessed enough with wanting to be Polly's friend at the time. There's a time that they were in the first play together, the Pierrot play, and Tom came to see it with Mary to see Polly perform. And even though Fiona and Polly weren't friends yet at that point, Fiona followed her to watch her meet with this weird older man because she wanted to be Polly's friend and know everything about her. Polly and Fiona are really cute. And so she remembers Polly having this weird man who came to see her at the play. And that is enough to prove to Polly that Thomas Lynn is real. And then she can chase him down and find out, remember all the stories that he gave her. Find out about Tom Lynn and Thomas the Rhymer, and figure out what she needs to do, which is go to a crossroads and hold on. And that's the way to solve the story, right?
Right. So here we go back to that sort of very early Jonesian technique of, here is the myth, you finally found the correct story. And unlike sort of early takes on this, unlike, say, Dog's Body, where we are read the Mabinogion early in the book, and then that's the answer, here you spend quite a lot of the book sort of with Polly flailing around looking for, wait, what story am I in? Which of these many, many books Tom sent me is the book? Is it all of them? How do I use this? But we eventually get to a sequence where Polly and Granny are talking specifically about a particular story, and Granny is like, read the bit that's instructions.
Right. And Granny says, I wish I'd had this bit. If I'd had this story, if I'd known this story, I could have rescued your grandfather.
Mm-hmm. So Polly is like, okay, I go and follow the instructions. She needs to go to the crossroads. We've known from early on that Miles Cross is the name of the train station in her
Yep.
town. So she
Yep.
goes to the train station and she sees the Leroys come and go. She sees the young men come and go. And finally, she sees the musicians arrive. And it is the quartet, Tom and his three friends. And none of them appear to remember or recognize her. And there's a very moving sequence of Polly finally standing up to feeling silly with embarrassment. She gets on the train with Tom, even though it's deeply embarrassing, and all of them are incredibly embarrassed for her.
Yes. Tom has to pretend not to know her. This is laid on him. They go back and forth where he's like, I don't know who you are. Why are you hanging on to me? It's everything that Laurel said was true that he's now had to make true. And Polly pushes through. She is determined until she eventually is able to break through, to kind of, she's determined enough to push him, to force him to admit that he does remember her because he accidentally says her name. And she, at that point, she starts laughing. And he realizes he's made a mistake. He says, "Did you happen to remark what your name was?" And she says, "No, I didn't, and you know it. And of course, my name isn't Polly, as you also know. It's Hero. I am the hero that we have been making
the
up."
identity, yes.
Yes. And so, right, she's done it. Right now, all she has to do is hang on. That's what the story
Right.
of Tamlin tells us.
She got there. She hung on to him. She made him remember her. That they acknowledge their relationship to each other at this point, and at this point, it is fully a romance. They get to Hunston House, and they are embracing and kissing outside the gate.
It has always been a romance. Tom says, "I've always loved your hair," which is so uncomfortable.
But not for Polly. Polly's fine with it.
Polly loves it. And again, I think, the book is about being two things at once. It has always been a romance, it has always been a friendship, it has always been a kind of abuse, and it has always been the thing that rescued both of them. And all of those things are packed in together. You can't extricate them.
Absolutely. That's really well put. Nice one, Becca. Sorry. I was like, yeah, I like that. That is it. It's always been everything.
Yeah.
All of
those. Nowhere and now, here and where now.
Right. But we still haven't actually solved the book.
Yeah, I can't leave this room.
It's doomed to die. Oh my god, we've been at this for over an hour. You can't leave this room.
I can't leave this room until we do it. All right, so the ending. What does the ending of Fire and Hemlock mean?
Right, let's go over the facts. They are in the garden. They are back in a garden party at Hunston House, as they were at the very beginning of the book. Tom and the quartet are the servants. They are playing music for the Leroy Perrys as they eat small sandwiches and stand around making small talk in pretty dresses. Laurel, in the center of it, is sitting on a swing chair like a throne, with Leslie beside her. Leslie with his head in her lap. Very clearly, I think, actually, the kidnapped boy in Midsummer Night's Dream. Titania's fairy boy, Titania's mortal boy who she wants. I think that's there as well. And the quartet perform, and they perform brilliantly. And for my money, one of the most chilling moments in this whole sequence is when a random party guest says, "They always do something like this."
Yeah.
And it's clear that this has happened so many times, that every boy whom Laurel has groomed and abused and killed was a person of great potential, a performer perhaps, a musician perhaps, an artist perhaps, someone who is being robbed of their life, their future, and their talent by the Fairy Queen's abusers.
Yes. And Seb says at this point, seeing Polly clinging on to Tom, "It was between me and him. It always was. And Tom used you too. Surely you understand, Polly. If they don't take him, they'll take me instead." And Polly thinks of the way Seb had gripped her arm, and she did see that Seb had been afraid for most of his life.
But we still don't feel sorry for him. I mean, we feel sorry for him. The book doesn't appear to. Or does it? I don't know. I think Seb is a tragic figure, actually, and his fate is a tragic one.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, by a complicated mechanism I am not quite sure I understand, Polly challenges Laurel.
Wait, first, real quick, before Polly challenges Laurel, Tom's older brother shows up, reveals that he's been his older brother all along, attempts to get Leslie out of there, is summarily dismissed because he made a bargain with Laurel to take Tom instead of him. He can't therefore now offer himself up instead of Leslie, who is his son, because Laurel never makes bargains with people more than once.
Which is important because Polly has already made a bargain with Laurel. She made that
Yep.
agreement to forget. So, in fact, Polly has no right to make to challenge her again.
Exactly. Enter Charles Piper, exit Charles Piper. Goodbye, Charles Piper.
Thank you. You've done your pot roll.
Yeah. Do it yourself. But now, nonetheless, Polly has a chance to manipulate the rules because it turns out that not Laurel, but Morton Leroy has been breaking the rules by trying to hurt Polly. There's a little bit of an echo of Homeward Bounders in here. If you find a way in which they're cheating, you can leverage that. You can crack it open, but you can't cheat back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I do find it interesting that actually the way it cracks open is that because Morton's been targeting Polly, and he doesn't have the right to do that.
Yes.
Because only Laurel is allowed to hurt Polly, perhaps.
Yes.
This which we talked about in our sort of we do pre-game all these discussions. We have to.
Oh yeah.
Just so much. We talked about Witch Week and the invisible dividing line that goes down the classroom between the genders, and the boys are allowed to pick on boys and the girls are allowed to pick on girls, but you're not allowed to cross the line except to be nasty to Brian Wentworth.
Yep.
I would argue that in the scheme of Fire and Hemlock, Seb is possibly Brian Wentworth.
Oh, anyone can be nasty to him, you're right. And he is nasty himself.
Right, but Morton has been targeting Polly. He's been trying to hurt her. He tried to sort of manipulate her into committing suicide. He chased after her with the weird monster in Bristol. The portcullis incident, Tom saved Polly because that was aimed at her.
Yes.
And Morton has been doing this apparently out of terror that what Tom and Polly are doing will work. Because if Tom is not sacrificed, is not sent to hell, it's implied that it's Morton who gets it.
Yep. And meanwhile, Seb thinks it's going to be him. In fact, it seems clear that it's going to be Morton, and what that dooms Seb to is becoming the next Morton. And in fact, what Morton has been doing all this time is just pushing them closer. Everything that he's done, which I think is important to the ending too, right? Everything that he's done to try and pull them apart, to remove Polly from the equation, to push them away, has in fact had the opposite effect, has pushed them closer together, has interwoven their creativity, has made Tom seem more exciting to Polly, more dangerous, and more compelling.
Right. But because Polly points out this breaking of the rules, Laurel then says, well, we can set up a contest. Polly herself is not directly involved. It is Tom versus Morton. One of them has to go to hell in the form of a mysterious swimming pool full of mysterious and spooky water.
Yeah.
Because death is always water. Here it is. One of them has to go to hell. And they are allowed to use anything that's really theirs to help them.
Specifically, what she says is Tom can use anything that's really his, and whatever he uses, Morton can use its exact equivalent.
This is where the book gets weird and hard to parse.
Yes. Yes. Many, many essays have been written trying to parse what happens next. So Tom starts trying to summon things to help him. He summons his cello. Surely his music is really his. Surely his cello is really his. But summoning his cello seems to push him closer to the void at the center of the swimming pool, the hole, and push Morton further away. And so Polly, looking at this, realizes there's been a cheat somehow, that anything that Tom calls to try and use that's really his somehow pushes him more towards death instead of further away from it. Then he tries to summon the horse. Death and water and the horse.
The symbol of his rage and his desperation to escape.
Yes.
The horse.
And the symbol
that pushes him down as well.
And the symbol of the fiction that he and Polly have been writing together as well. Is one of the first things that they experienced. It is the first thing that they experienced that came true.
I think it is important that Morton is allowed to use the exact equivalent, because that's what Morton has been doing all along, right? Throughout the book, Tom's own gifts are worked against him and forced against him.
Yes.
Anything that Tom has, because he belongs to Laurel, anything he has can be used against him by Laurel and her husband.
Yes. What the book says specifically is Tom on his own could not send Mr. Leroy to the pool. Any help sent Tom there instead. Out of the smear, the one clear thing was Laurel sitting upright in her seat, watching Tom with a small, grave smile. Laurel, with chilly, malicious logic, had made sure that there was only one way Tom could win. All right, Polly thought, so the only way to win is to lose. I'll have to lose. And she walks into the pool, and she tells Tom the exact truth about their relationship. She says, it was an even worse mistake the way you used me. You took me over as a child to save your own skin. Which is true. That's 100% what he did.
And it's what was done to him as well.
Yes.
He knew exactly how bad it was when he did it, because that's what he was trying to get away from.
The truth between two people always cuts two ways, is what Polly thinks. As she does this, and as she pushes Tom away from her in order to convince him that he can't use her and he can't use anything to get him out of hell. And in doing that, pushes Mr. Leroy towards hell and dupes him. So, why does everything that is truly Tom's push him closer to hell? What is the logic there?
Oh, God. I don't.
So I've read two explanations of this. I'm gonna just while we were prepping for this, one explanation that I read from Lila Garrett's essay is that hell is also creativity. Nowhere is now, or now here is nowhere. That the bottom of the pool is both the creative magic that causes their gift and the doorway to doom. And because it's both those things, using his creativity, anything that's associated with that, pushes Tom closer to it. It's pulling him towards it. The other explanation, which I quite like from Farah Mendelssohn, is that it is that Tom is relying on sentimentality. That is what dooms him as he's pulling things. She actually compares this to the end of Time of the Ghost, which I do think this book is another. As much as it's an echo of Dalemark, it's also an echo of Time of the Ghost. To Imogen giving up her career in order to escape from under the thumb of a powerful goddess, the dream of an imagined career, in order to.
Oh, because actually, what the cello represents and what the horse represents are both things that aren't real, or that are a mixture of fact and fiction. Tom's rage is real, but what he's upset about is the life he never had and will never get to have, and that's not real. That's an imagined future.
Right.
And the cello works in the same way, representing a career he hasn't had yet. Like, what has Tom actually got that's real? That's because when he creates fiction, that can be used against him, because that's the nature of his gift from Laurel.
Right. And again, I don't think it's an exact map to Time of the Ghost, because Imogen never wanted her career. Her career is not just unreal, but it's been forced on. The dream of her career has been kind of forced on her by her mother, who in that book is the Laurel equivalent. And all of these things, again, in Fire and Hemlock, which is a book that always exists in two opposite ways at once, all of these things are both fiction and true. His music belongs to him, but it was also a gift from Laurel. His anger and his creativity belong to him, but they've also been taken and warped by Laurel. And he's made Polly, but Polly is also her own person who has a right to take herself back, which is what she does. So I guess that's the closest thing I can make to an understanding of what's happening here. Why Tom sort of dooms himself until Polly breaks them apart.
I think in some ways the climax of this book works more on an emotional level than a logical one, as much as the text dwells on the chilly logic of what Laurel's doing and how Polly is countering it. I think the emotional climax here is that there has to be some kind of answer to the book's core problem, core question, which is, why is an adult man interested in a little girl? What has Tom been doing to Polly? And the sentimental answer, the answer that Polly made for herself most sentimentally, was that it was a beautiful romance from the very beginning, that she was rescued after the rejection of her father, the evil king.
Yeah.
Reg. by this wonderful man who trained her up to be a hero, and then their relationship began to change, and she saw him shirtless, and it was very sexy. 700,000 words, hurt comfort, rated. Let's not talk about the rating. But that's a sentimental version of this story, because the truth is that there has always been something terrible about Tom and Polly, and until Polly acknowledges that, their relationship cannot be based on anything
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
Polly rejects the sentimental construction of their relationship that she had, in which she is Janet and she's happy to be Janet and she's overjoyed to have Tom tell her that he'd always loved her hair. She rejects that version of their relationship for one in which Tom has been using her all along,
Yeah.
which is true. One in which Polly is her own person, not just Tom's creation, which is true. For one in which Polly deserves to get away from him and to have her own life. She's young. She's got a career ahead of her. She doesn't need him. She doesn't belong to him. All of this is true, and this is what she says to him, and it hurts like hell. It
Yeah.
really hurts him because it's true, and he wasn't expecting it. Polly says he'd been completely sure of her. And
Yeah.
Tom had no right to be sure of this girl who he'd abused and groomed and raised up, who he'd trained as a hero.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Polly tells him the truth, and the truth belongs to him.
Yeah.
Truth belongs to him and cannot be used against him by Laurel and Leroy, because it was already true.
Yes.
They can't turn it into a horrible truth that turns on him, because it's already a horrible truth that's turning on him.
Yeah.
In fact, Polly is, if you like, she's being Laurel. She's taking Laurel's place. She's the one who hurts Tom with the truth.
And
And that emotionally has to be the climax, because that's the only way that their relationship can ever become anything true. That it can.
yes.
I don't know if I'm fully making sense here, but
No, I think you
I think
are.
that's what's happening. That it's an emotional answer to the book rather than a logical one. And if we get bogged down in what exactly are the details of Laurel's bargain, we're just going to confuse ourselves.
Right. Well, and the other way in which it's an emotional answer, it's an emotional answer to the question of how a text makes a hero, because Polly takes as her guide Tamlin, which says, in order to love, in order to save someone, to possess someone, you have to hold on. In this book, a thing is always the thing and its opposite. You have to simultaneously, love means simultaneously holding on and letting go. What Polly says at the very end is, if to love someone enough to let them go, you had to let them go forever if you did not love them that much. You have to do this impossible thing of shamelessly holding on as hard as you can, never letting go, and always 100% being able to let go, let that person go be their own person, or it's not love.
I mean, this is really almost the triumph of Tom's hero training sequence, right? He has trained up Polly into a person who doesn't need him, who doesn't even want him, who is a hero in her own right without him.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
I find striking at the very end, so every chapter, the whole book has been structured around these sort of four movements, the four quartets, and then there is a coda, a final chapter. Every chapter in this book has a little quotation from Tamlin or Thomas the Rhymer to begin it. The quota, the quota, the quote, the quote for the coda is they shaped him in her arms at last, a mother naked man. And I think that is really what Polly does to Tom by telling him the truth. She strips
Yeah.
him naked.
Yeah.
There is an actual truth between them, not sentimental drivel, which was true but not the whole truth.
Right.
Not Polly's witchy attempt to snatch truth she had no right to. She has every right to the truth of what Tom's done to her, to the relationship between them. And she has rendered Tom his true self, which, if you call Tamlin, is the shapeshifter, right? Is
Yeah.
forcible
Yeah.
changing at the end to turn him back into a man, her man. He has to be who he truly is, which is the man who has done this terrible thing to a child.
Yeah. Absolutely. And because that truth is laid bare, because They've acknowledged the truth, and it has to go on being true. It has to be true forever. She can't not mean
Yeah.
it. She can't pretend it's not true.
Yeah, it will never not be the case that Tom is a monster.
But now that it's there, it's been put on the table. They've acknowledged it and internalized it, and they can move beyond it because the truth is real, and their relationship can also be real. The ending of this book famously says, "It's quite impossible. For you, the only way to behave well was to behave badly. For me, the only way to win was to lose. You weren't to know me, and I wasn't to remember you. If two people can't get together anywhere, you think?" Tom said with a shivery laugh. "Nowhere?" "Yes, and if it's not true nowhere, it has to be somewhere. We've got her either way."
This is an extraordinary piece of logic chopping from Polly, but to be fair, she is the Fairy Queen, and that is what the Fairy Queen does. She's Laurel's double and echo. But this, the idea of the movement from now here to nowhere to where now is where Polly finds the solution. This is I think it is a cheat. It is a cheat, but Laurel's cheated all the way through. Why not Polly?
Yeah.
To say that there is some way, somehow, in which their relationship can survive, built on the truth of how awful their history is.
Yeah. Did we do it? Did we solve Fire and Hemlock?
I don't think so. Will they ever let you out of this room? I don't know. But I think we better call the episode there because I don't think we can do any better.
Yeah, sounds good. Oh, so next week we'll be doing we're moving to a different mode. We're going to be doing Hell's Moving Castle. We're going to have a guest on that one. We're very excited about that. Also, we've just found out, I don't know when this is going to come out in context of the timeline of the Hugos, but we've just found out that we're apparently a Hugo-nominated podcast, which is very exciting. So
thank you very much to those who nominated 8 Days of Diana for a Hugo Award, because, like, wow, yeah. This is the work I am proudest of from the last year. I think we've done really good work. On an author we love. But thank you very, very much for listening, and thank you for supporting us. And if you do find yourself voting for the Hugos, depending on when this comes out, you may already have voted for the Hugos, or they may not even be open yet. Right. But if you feel like it, you could vote for this podcast at some time in the past or future.
Time is always funny in Diana Wood Jones. It's especially funny in Fire and Hemlock. So if now here you find that you're voting for the Hugos, go ahead and do it, and otherwise do it nowhere. All right, let's call it there.
All right.
See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.